Chapter 3097. These words probably pierced her heart. Perhaps I was right, but she immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation and rushed over to pull my hair. But why didn't she think about it? I'd been hanging out with boys since I was young. I wasn't afraid of fighting. She pulled my hair and I punched her in the face. When the two girls behind her saw this, they rushed up as well. The three of them fought me together. However, I didn't back down at all. I wrestled with them and they tore at my clothes. Just then, footsteps rushed over and a pair of hands separated us. The next second, I saw Su Qi glaring at them angrily and shielding me behind him. "What are you doing? Su Qi, why are you here?" When the girl saw him, she questioned him with an aggrieved expression. "Don't tell me you've really fallen for her? Su Qi, I'm your girlfriend." Su Qi turned around and glanced at me. When he turned back, his tone was cold. "You used to be, but not anymore." "What do you mean?" "I mean it literally. Don't you understand?" Su Qi. Tears welled up in her eyes and she glared at me before looking at him. "So, you're breaking up with me for her, right?" Su Qi said. "Back then you were the one who chased me while crying. I took pity on you, so I agreed. It was just a perfunctory thing. You don't have to take it seriously." These words were heartbreaking for a girl who was still in puberty and had ignorant fantasies about love. "Are you sure you want to break up with me?" She pointed at me. "Because of her? Yuan Jing, stop pestering me. Do you know that what you're doing makes me feel disgusted?" He warned again. "Also, I'm warning you, don't make trouble for her again." When Yuan Jing heard this, she clenched her fists and wiped away her tears. Then she turned around and ran away. The two girls behind her chased after her in a panic. The three of them gradually disappeared into the distance. I immediately shook off his hand with an awkward expression. "Don't touch me, okay? You make it sound like we're very close." Su Qi turned around and looked at me with a smile. "Inshatran. I'll remember your name." Su Qi approached me, the expression on his face so gentle that it was a little unfamiliar. "Let's date. Can you be my girlfriend?" "Why should I be your girlfriend?" "Because I like you." I didn't understand why it was so easy for him to say the words, "I like you," which sounded so hard for me to say. It was so relaxed that I felt that his so-called love was definitely not very heavy. I pretended I didn't hear anything and turned to leave. He caught up with me and walked side by side with me. He even reached out and took my bag from my hands as if he was trying to please me. I extended my hand to snatch it from him, but he dodged and smiled brightly. "Your backpack is so heavy. Let me help you carry it." "I don't need your kindness." I tried to snatch it again, but he grabbed my hand and held it tightly. Then he smiled brightly at me. As if I had touched a hot potato, I shook off his hand. He was clearly touching my hand, but my face felt hot as if it had been scalded. I turned my head and said, "It's getting late. I'm going home." He immediately leaned over. "I'll take you home." Chapter 3098. Su Qi pursed his lips but did not relent. "I like following you around." I couldn't stand it. It was only our second time meeting, but he seemed to be very familiar with me. I flew into a rage out of humiliation and asked him back, "What do you want?" Su Qi was surprised for a moment, but he still smiled, revealing his snow-white teeth. "Can't you tell that I'm chasing you?" My heart skipped a beat. Perhaps it was because his smile was too dazzling, but I quickly turned my head and said, "My mother doesn't allow me to date at such a young age." "You're already so old. Does your mother still care about you?" I ignored him and reached for my bag. Su Qi avoided me again and said, "I'll take you home." "No." "Yes." "No." "Yes." Su Qi threatened. "Otherwise, I'll tell the girls in your class that you like me." "Who likes you?" I didn't know he was such a scoundrel, but I was really afraid that he would tell the people in my class that he liked me. So I could only say, "Then you can't take me to the door. At most, you can take me to the bridge." "Okay. Then give me back my bag." Su Qi didn't insist and returned the bag to me. I took it, put it on my back and immediately ran home. Inshatran. He realized that he had been tricked and shouted angrily behind me. I didn't look back as if he was some kind of monster. I ran as fast as I could until I reached the bridgehead. I looked back and saw that I had shaken him off, so I stopped running. I panted as I walked back home. I thought that he would give up. Unexpectedly, Su Qi was even more persistent than I had imagined. Unexpectedly, I met him again at the gate the next day after class. He was sitting on a bicycle. When he saw me, he got off and pushed the bicycle in front of me. He snorted coldly. "Little liar." I looked at him guiltily and lowered my head. I couldn't help but wonder if he had waited for me at the school gate on his bicycle today just to make it easier for him to chase after me. Don't follow me anymore. I'm going home. I turned around and left. He caught up with me and tugged at my sleeve. Don't. It's still early. I'll treat you to some fun. I don't want to. If I don't go home, my mother will be worried. Using your mother as a shield again. He grabbed the strap of my bag and smiled. Let's go. I'll take you to a fun place. Seeing that I couldn't avoid it this time, I got in the car. I thought that with his persistence, he would definitely follow me to my doorstep. Sitting on the back seat, I was worried about how to get rid of this annoying guy. When I came back to my senses, I found the bike parked at a luxurious place. At the door stood a few young students. 2 of them looked like gangsters. When they saw Suchi, they greeted him respectfully. Brother Suchi, you're here. Skating rink? I looked at the lighted sign and was startled. Suchi asked me, have you ever skated? I shook my head. To me, places like skating rinks, internet cafes, and karaoke rooms are all bad places. Whether it's parents or teachers, they are all forbidden from entering those places. Chapter 3099. I wasn't an obedient child, but I avoided such places. Hence, I was particularly resistant to entering such places. I immediately said, I don't like skating. I'd better go home. No. He put his arm around my shoulder and smiled. Skating is fun. You'll want to do it a second time after you've done it once. I haven't finished my homework yet. If I'm late, I won't be able to finish it in time. He snatched my bag and threw it to a few high school students behind him. He instructed, help her finish her homework. Wait. I stopped him. If the handwriting is different, the teacher will be able to tell. I'll get them to write it in pencil. When you go back, erase and rewrite according to the answers. It'll be quick. But, no buts. I'll treat you to a drink. Just treat it as an apology from last time. An apology? Yes. As Suchi spoke, he tapped his lips suggestively and smiled meaningfully. Don't tell me that last time was your first kiss? When I heard this, my face heated up. I turned away from him. He leaned in again and asked in a low voice, am I the first boy to kiss you? I immediately said, no. His expression immediately changed. No. Then he said resentfully, seeing your excited reaction, I thought it was your first kiss. I said, my first kiss was long gone. Suchi was interested and asked, then who did you give your first kiss to? My brother. Your brother? Yes. I nodded and said, In Dongyu. Suchi immediately smiled disapprovingly. That doesn't count. I muttered curiously, why doesn't it count? He's your brother, so it doesn't count. The first kiss is for someone of the opposite sex other than family. How can your brother count? When I heard this, I became even more unhappy. Suchi's smile deepened. Does that mean I was your first kiss? I said angrily, if you keep talking nonsense, I'll really go home. All right. Suchi raised his hands in surrender. I was wrong, Missy. Let's go, I'll teach you how to skate. But even so, the corner of his mouth still held a secret smile, as if he was sure that it was my first kiss with him, and his mood was so bright. I ignored him and raised my head to look at the neon sign. For some reason, I didn't refuse and let him lead me in. I was quite curious about ice skating. I didn't know what kind of magical place the ice skating rink was. It made many parents' faces change when they talked about it. When they entered the skating rink, many people were wearing ice skates and playing freely on the field. Sometimes, there would be people lining up and grabbing the clothes of the people in front of them, forming a long line. I glanced around and saw a lot of guys and girls with strange hairstyles and strange clothes. Especially those ripped jeans, baggy pant legs, the clothes that hung down to his shoulders, and his hairstyle that was dyed in all sorts of colors. His weird aesthetic made people feel uncomfortable just by looking at him. Suchi hugged me and bought the tickets. Then he changed into his ice skates. I actually found it novel. It seemed to be quite fun. Chapter 3100. Suchi hugged me, bought the tickets, and then changed into his skates. I actually found it novel. It seemed to be quite fun. When I was young, I was always filled with a desire to explore the unknown. I wanted to get close to it, to get to the bottom of it, to figure out what was going on, and to be immersed in it. But it often brought about scars. My parents always said that we, the younger generation, would not give up until we hit a brick wall. But the truth was that there were some things that one might not give up on even if they hit a brick wall. Even if one was covered in injuries, one had to continue down this path. For example, when it came to ice skating, one would often end up covered in injuries in the beginning. Bam. I lost count of the number of times I slipped and fell to the ground. Suchi skated in front of me, smiled at me, and reached out his hand to me. I looked at the pulley under his feet, not sure if he would also fall if he pulled me. However, Suchi saw my worry and said confidently, "Don't worry. I'm very skilled. I won't fall." Only then did I extend my hand to him skeptically. He grabbed my hand and pulled me to my feet. Suchi pulled me forward, but I didn't dare. After being on the ice for so long, it was difficult for me to even walk. Hence, I grabbed the railing tightly and refused to walk with him. However, he didn't see my actions. Hence, with the two forces resisting each other, I lost my balance and fell backward. Almost subconsciously, I grabbed his hand tightly. He was caught off guard. When he turned around, he lost his balance because of me. With a bang, I fell to the ground. He also fell on top of me. Fortunately, he reacted in time. Afraid of crushing me, he supported himself with both hands. Because of the impact, the back of my head hurt a lot. I complained in annoyance. When I opened my eyes, I was met with a pair of clear eyes. He stared at me. At such a close distance, his breath was on my face. For a moment, I didn't dare to breathe because I felt that if I breathed, what entered my lungs would be his gentle breath. A few of his friends skated over. When they saw this scene, they were overjoyed. "Suchi, you're really something. Suchi is getting better and better at picking up girls." Suchi obviously didn't hear what they were saying. He looked at me intently, but I heard it. In my embarrassment, I pushed him. Did you do it on purpose?" Get up." I complained, "You're so heavy." "Oh." Suchi immediately got up and pulled me up. I shook off his hand, tidied my clothes, and stood aside with a red face. They were still laughing. Suchi turned around and glared at them. "If you keep laughing, I'll teach you a lesson." All right. Stop messing around." The few of them laughed and dispersed. Suchi looked at me and asked, "Are you okay?" I ignored him. He smiled and said, "Do you know how to skate?" I shook my head blankly. He said, "The biggest trick of ice skating is not to be afraid of falling." I was stunned. Don't be afraid of falling? But it would hurt if she fell. Chapter 3101. How will you learn if it doesn't hurt? More importantly, you have to be bold. Don't be afraid. You'll never learn to walk with small steps while holding onto the railing. With that, he reached out his hand to me. "Come, give me your hand." I looked at him warily. "What are you doing?" "Give me your hand." I hesitated for a few seconds. Then I reached out my hand timidly. He grabbed my hand and pulled me to him. I swayed as he pulled me to him. My body was so stiff that I didn't dare to move an inch. "Relax." He looked at me and laughed. "You're usually quite fierce. You act like you're the biggest and aren't afraid of anything. Why are you so timid now that you're on roller skates?" I snorted coldly but didn't say anything. He faced me, holding my hand as he skated backwards. I was dumbfounded and my eyes went straight. "Won't you fall if you skate backwards?" "Of course not." He was smug, as if it was rare for him to have something to show off. "Am I very good?" I focused all my attention on the ground beneath my feet. I felt like I was being dragged by him like a trolley. "You can try moving your feet while maintaining your balance." I shook my head like a broken drum. Suchi said, "Don't be afraid of falling. Even if you fall, I'll be with you." As he said that, I grew a little bolder. With him holding my hand, I could actually stagger forward. I got the hang of it a little. In the end, I was able to skate slightly smoothly under his lead. However, the price of learning to skate was still very expensive. My knees were bruised from the fall. When I walked out of the skating rink, I felt as if my knees had cracked. I grimaced in pain. Suchi asked me, "Is it serious? Does it hurt a lot?" With that, he squatted down to check on the situation. I immediately dodged and said guiltily, "It's nothing. It's getting late. Take me home." Suchi smiled and stared at my face for a long time. Suddenly he said, "So you can be shy too?" "What do you mean?" "Nothing." Suchi gave her a look. "Get in the car, I'll take you home." I sat in the back seat unwillingly. His steps were a little shaky and I immediately grabbed the corner of his shirt nervously. He said, "If you're scared, you can hug me." "No way." Suchi snorted and said disapprovingly, "How many girls want to sit in the back seat of my car? They don't even have the chance." "I don't care." All right, eldest miss. I was the one who begged you to take my car." Suki rode a little faster and the bike sped along the dark road. I stared at the wheels under my feet, spinning fast. The breeze gently lifted the corner of his clothes. I saw the moonlight and the shadows of the lamps intertwined and fell on his body. His back blocked the bleak night wind for me and I didn't feel so cold anymore. When I arrived downstairs, I started to feel nervous. It was the first time I had returned home so late. I didn't know what to say when I got home. Su-chi stuffed his bag into my arms and said, "I've done my homework. Remember to erase and rewrite it when you get home." How's the accuracy? It can't be all wrong, right? You're kidding? Junior high school homework is very simple. Just scribble. Su-chi looked at me and asked, "Do you want me to take you upstairs?" Chapter 3102. There's no need. I stared at him and urged, "Hurry up and go home." Su-chi nodded as if he still wanted to say something. I was suddenly a little afraid that he would say something that would make me feel awkward. I quickly stopped him. "Be careful on the road. Do you have a cell phone?" he suddenly asked. I shook my head and frowned. "Why are you asking about my cell phone?" A cell phone was a luxury item for us in middle school. Usually, those who brought a cell phone to school were from wealthy families. Otherwise, they would only be equipped with one in high school. I shook my head and said, "No." Su-chi didn't persist. He waved his hand casually and left. I turned around and was about to go upstairs when I saw a slender figure on a small stone bench downstairs under the street lamp. I took a closer look and was shocked. Dongyu? I didn't know how long he had been sitting there and waiting. He must have seen Su-chi send me back just now. I suddenly felt a little guilty. Dongyu slowly stood up and walked towards me. There was a hint of anger and sullenness in his eyes. He looked down at me and then at the bag in my arms. He asked in a low voice, "You're back so late. Where did you go?" I looked at him and hesitated. After thinking for a long time, I lied. "I went to my classmate's house for tuition." Classmate? Dongyu's expression darkened. "So why were you with Su-chi?" "Huh." I was even more flustered. "Brother, you saw everything." Usually I would call him by his name. Only when I made a mistake and angered him would I carefully call him brother. "Did you know?" Dongyu suddenly said, "When you lie, you don't dare to look at me." I lowered my head, feeling a little embarrassed. "I didn't mean to lie to you. I was just afraid that you'd be worried. I admit that I really don't know how to lie. The most perfect lie in my life was when I cried to him one day and told him, 'Dongyu, I don't love you anymore. I've let go.' Dongyu couldn't bear to blame me too much. I knew that as long as I showed such an expression, he would definitely not pursue the matter. 'Since you know that I will be worried, then don't come home so late next time.'" He lowered his head and his gaze suddenly landed on my knee. There was a tinge of heartache in his eyes. He immediately squatted down and touched the bruise with his fingertips. He furrowed his beautiful eyebrows and asked, "What happened?" "I fell." He looked up. "You fell? How did you fall?" I said, "I accidentally tripped on a rock." Dongyu was so angry that he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He poked my head hard and said, "You can even fall while walking? Are your eyes growing on top of your head?" When I heard him say that, I knew he couldn't bear to be angry with me. I smiled and hugged his arm, burrowing into his embrace. "Brother, I was wrong." Dongyu took the opportunity to hug me. He sounded helpless and couldn't bear to say anything more. He only said calmly, "Do you know how worried I am?" He couldn't reach me and I didn't have a phone, so he stayed downstairs and waited for me. I whispered, "I won't do it again." "There will be a next time?" "No more, no more. There will be no next time. Remember, don't come home late." Chapter 3103. I took his hand and was about to follow him upstairs when I suddenly asked nervously, "Where's Mom and Dad?" "They're asleep." "Then?" I hesitated for a moment, not daring to go upstairs. "Will they scold me? They must be angry that I'm home so late." "I told them that you were tutoring at your classmate's house, but they didn't say much." "Brother, you're amazing." Dongyu glared at me and I didn't dare to make a sound. I followed him upstairs and entered my room. I had just taken out my exercise book when he checked it for me as usual. I refused, but he moved quickly. He picked up the exercise book and flipped through it, only to find that there was something fishy about it. He had always been observant. Sensing that there was something wrong with the handwriting, he hit me on the head with the exercise book. "Who helped you with this homework?" "Su-chi's friend." Dongyu was stunned and made a move to hit me with the exercise book. I shrunk my shoulders and looked timid. He was both angry and amused. Then he erased all the answers on the exercise book with an eraser. I exclaimed and quickly reached out to snatch the eraser from him. "Brother, what are you doing?" "Redo it. Use your own brain." Dongyu stared at me. "The monthly exam is coming up. Do you know how to do these questions?" "I know." "Then do it for me." "But it's already so late. I'm sleepy." "I'll accompany you." Dongyu tidied up my exercise book and took out a book. After flipping through it casually, he had a rough idea of what to do. I had no choice but to work through the night and finish all my homework. It wasn't until 1 in the morning that I climbed into bed. After taking a shower, Dongyu entered my room. Seeing that I was already lying on the bed, unable to open my eyes, he gave me a carton of milk. Then, he glanced at my unpacked bag on the table and silently helped me tidy it up. When he walked out of the room, my eyelids couldn't hold on any longer. The moment the door closed, I fell asleep. The next day after school, Suchi was waiting for me at the school gate again. I didn't know if this had anything to do with boys' desire to conquer during puberty, but at the time I thought that such persistence definitely didn't involve much liking. Every day after school he would ride his bicycle and wait for me at the school gate. I usually ignored him, turned around and walked in the direction of home. He would often ride his bicycle and follow behind me. Even if I didn't communicate with him at all, he still seemed to enjoy it. With him following me, I naturally couldn't wait for Dongyu to go home together. After all, if he saw me with Suchi, I wouldn't be able to explain myself no matter how many times I tried. It's not like I didn't know what kind of guy Suki was. Rumor had it that he was a particularly dandy child. In addition to his dark history of fighting, smoking and drinking, he also had a lot of criminal records. Suchi's reputation was so great that even though we were separated by a street, rumors about him had spread like wildfire in my school. I heard that he has dated many girls. Some of them were pursued by him on his own accord, while others were destined to pursue him. All in all, there should be enough for a class, right? Chapter 3104. In the past, Suchi secretly drove his father's car out. It was a Bentley. I heard it cost a few million each. He didn't have a driver's license and his car and person were detained by the traffic police. In the end, it was his father who took him back. Suchi's family is very rich. His parents are very prestigious entrepreneurs in the city. I heard that he lives in a mansion from Shuang Long's original novel. It's more than 1,000 square meters in size and has 2 swimming pools. The back garden is bigger than a football field. My impression of him was even worse. But no matter how much I tried to avoid him, I seemed to have underestimated his patience. Once a young boy developed a strong interest in something, he would probably become very passionate about it. He would do it regardless of anyone's opinion. He liked to play basketball and worked hard at it. He chased after a girl and worked hard at it. They didn't need to think about whether it would succeed or fail. Perhaps they just enjoyed the joy of the process, including the matter of love. When I grew up, I used to think that if we, who had entered society and gradually learned to deal with things smoothly, who had learned to give up on what we couldn't get, and who didn't have to be so persistent, whether it was Suchi or me, would we have been like moths to a flame, chasing after the lighthouse in our hearts without care for our own safety. Just like how I liked Dongyu, how could Suchi's love for me not go its own way? When we were young, adults laughed at us for being too naive and simple. We never thought much of it. We thought we were mature. We were unruly, unwilling, vigorous, rebellious. We thought that our society was the real society. Adults were the stupid ones. But when I grew up and looked back, I suddenly realized that I was really naive and simple when I was young. Since I was young, I thought that if I liked someone, I had to be fearless. But after I grew up, I found it difficult to muster up the courage to love. It was precisely because I was too rational that I knew very well that if I fell deeply in love, I would be hurt again and again. I always say now, don't be too obsessed with love. It doesn't bring any benefits. Only a few people are happy and most of them suffer the pain of being lost. Persevering again and again until finally giving up reluctantly. It's unforgettable. Love, half of it is enough. It's not all there is to life. However, people may say nice things but they may not necessarily do well. At most, I'm just trying to show off. Even I can't get out of this predicament. It's like being trapped in a foggy swamp. At that time, Suchi was probably like me, fearless when it came to love. Perhaps it was his persistence that finally moved me. When he handed me a cornetto, I took it and said, "Thank you." I didn't notice how flattered he looked. "You're finally willing to talk to me?" I smiled. I was willing to pay attention to him because I thought he was too silly. He followed me around like a shadow every day. Ever since I was young, I was the only one who followed Dongyu around. One day there was also someone who followed behind me like I did. It seemed that because of this, I didn't hate his face that much anymore. "It's not bad to have someone accompany me home." Suchi smiled. I glanced at him and couldn't help but say, "You don't seem as bad as the rumors say." Chapter 3105. Rumors? Suchi's interest was piqued. "What rumors?" "Rumors about you. Some people say that you skip class, smoke, drink, get into fights, and that a girl once had an abortion for you. Are these all true?" When Suchi heard this, he laughed mockingly. "Well, that's all. I thought it was something else." "Then are these rumors true?" Half-truths. Half-truths. I was even more confused. I didn't understand what he meant. It's either true or false. What do you mean by half-truths? Sometimes what you see may not be true. What he heard with his ears might not necessarily be true. For example, I smoke, I drink, and I get into fights. These are all true. But there are rumors that a girl once had an abortion for me. I accompanied a girl to have an abortion, but I wasn't the one who got her pregnant. If it wasn't you, who was it? Well, I can't tell you. Suchi smiled. I promised to keep it a secret. Petty? I muttered, you have so many secrets. Who doesn't have secrets? If you really want to know, why don't we trade? Suchi rode around to stand in front of me and sized me up. You should have a little secret too. You tell me your secret and I'll tell you mine. That's only fair. I looked at him seriously. After a while, I smiled at him and pretended to be mysterious. I can't tell you. Tisk. Suchi looked indifferent. Turning around, I bit my lip and clutched my chest, my heart racing. I returned home with a heavy heart. When I pushed open the door to the study, I saw that Dongyu's books were still neatly arranged on his desk. Obviously, he hadn't returned home from school yet. I stood there for a long time recalling Suchi's words. Just as he said, everyone has an unspeakable secret in their hearts. And my unspeakable secret was only related to Dongyu. I liked him. Since when did she realize that her feelings for him were not ordinary? Was it when he watched me bathe when I was being bullied, and then went to find that person angrily to denounce him? Or was it when I saw the other children flocking around him, and I longed for him to belong to me alone? Was it when Minglan said that Dongyu and I couldn't be together? Or was it when I saw him take out so many gifts from the table and throw them all into the trash can, and I felt incomparably happy in my heart? No one knew. From the moment I was born, my feelings for Dongyu were different from everyone else's. It wasn't the closeness of a family member, nor was it the love of a lover. Instead, in this world, other than him, I could become indifferent to anyone else. Could this be considered a form of love? I was a little confused about this. I wanted to understand, but I wasn't in a hurry to understand. He always felt that once some things were made clear, it would become difficult to make a choice. This kind of strange feeling became more and more perplexing after a random incident. I remember once, during the annual sports meet of First High School, I snuck into the school to play. I found Dongyu's classroom with familiarity. As soon as I walked in, I saw a girl standing sneakily in front of Dongyu's desk. She was holding an envelope in her hand as if she was going to stuff it in. Chapter 3106. The girl was startled by my sudden action. She patted her chest and turned to look at me with a baffled expression. "Who are you?" she muttered, blushing as she reached out to snatch the envelope from my hand. I dodged her and stubbornly asked, "Tell me. What is this?" "Why should I tell you? This is mine. Give it back to me." She reached out to snatch it from me. I held the envelope behind my back, almost glaring at her with a hostile look. "This is a love letter, isn't it?" A hint of embarrassment appeared on her face as she looked at me awkwardly. Then she asked in dissatisfaction, "Who are you? Who are you to control me?" "I don't care who you are, and you don't have to care who I am. Don't send such things over in the future." With that, I grabbed the envelope by the waist and tore it into pieces. She stared at me with her mouth agape. I thought that this love letter must have taken a lot of effort, but in my hands, it had turned into a pile of debris. One could imagine how angry she was that her eyes were red with anger. Footsteps came from outside the door. Dongyu and a few boys from his class returned to the classroom. When I saw him, I felt inexplicably at a loss. I felt like I had been caught red-handed. Just now, in a moment of impulse, I didn't care about anything else and did what I did. After calming down, I felt that I had indeed gone overboard. However, I couldn't control my hand. I just felt that the letter should have been torn into pieces. When the girl saw Dongyu, her eyes turned even redder. She burst into tears, feeling wronged and helpless. Dongyu walked over and looked at me, then at her. His face was filled with confusion. The boys behind him were also confused. "What's going on?" he asked with concern in a gentle tone. However, subconsciously he walked up to me. From the details, I knew that he was wholeheartedly protecting me. "Dongyu, who is she?" The girl pointed at me and complained, "She tore up the thing I gave you for no reason." Dongyu frowned and turned to look at me. His tone was low. "Xiachuan, why are you causing trouble again?" "Brother," I whispered, "I don't like other girls sending you love letters. Didn't Mom say that we shouldn't fall in love?" Dongyu was stunned for a few seconds. He had always been smart, so he immediately realized what had happened. I saw him bend down and pick up a few pieces from the ground. He put them together, a helpless expression on his face. He looked up and glanced at the girl. Love letter? The girl blushed and was a little embarrassed, but she still nodded. Yeah. You were the one who gave me that box of chocolates, right? Dongyu asked again. Hearing his question, she mustered up her courage and said, Dongyu, I like. As if he knew what she was going to say, Dongyu interrupted her bluntly and said lightly, Don't give me these things anymore. As he spoke, he took out a box of chocolates from the table. It was hot and the chocolate had melted. I didn't see him bring the chocolates home. It turned out that he had left them on his desk in the classroom. I kept forgetting to deal with this box of chocolates. Here you go. Chapter 3107. Aren't you going to hear me out? Since they had already spoken face to face, she mustered up her courage and said, Dongyu, I just transferred to First High School. I've liked you since the first time I saw you at the opening ceremony. I was the one who gave you the chocolates and the greeting cards. I didn't have the courage to confess to you. I also know that perhaps I'm overthinking and causing you trouble, but these are all my intentions. Must you reject them? Dongyu was a very soft-hearted person. At least, every time I got into trouble and he was angry with me, I would coax him and beg for mercy. No matter how angry he was, it would quickly dissipate. However, this was also the first time I realized that Dongyu wasn't soft-hearted. Although the girl looked like she was about to cry, his face remained cold. Don't cry and don't feel aggrieved. I know you like me, but I have no obligation to respond to you. The girl probably didn't expect his words to be so straightforward and cruel. Now that there were other people present, she felt embarrassed. She didn't even remember to take the chocolates. She turned around and rushed out of the classroom. Only then did a few boys come to life. They walked up to him and teased, Dongyu, do you have to hurt her like this? That's right. That girl's eyes are swollen. Dongyu glanced at them and said lightly, Since you can't give her any response, don't give her any hope. When I heard this, I couldn't help but be startled. On the way home, he rode his bike. I wrapped my arms around his waist and suddenly asked curiously, Dongyu, do you often receive love letters? No. I remember when we were in primary school, many girls liked you. I hugged him tightly and said uneasily, Will you have a girl you like in the future? As soon as I said that, I noticed that his back stiffened. Then I heard him ask in a deep voice, Do you have someone you like? No. I said immediately, I don't like anyone except you. That's just for now. Dongyu smiled. When you grow up, you'll have a boy you like. You'll get to know each other, fall in love with each other, and then spend the rest of your life with each other. That's not it. I said disdainfully, I like Dongyu the most. I don't like anyone else. At this point, he seemed to be avoiding the topic. What do you want to eat tonight? Seeing that he had skipped this topic, I didn't insist on it and changed the topic to something else. However, his words still made me uneasy. Would he have a girl he liked in the future? From knowing each other, to loving each other, to staying together for the rest of their lives? Then, what about me? When that time comes, where will my position be? That night, he fell asleep. I crept into his room and sat by his bed, looking at his sleeping face. Ever since he was young, the closest person to him was me. Only the heavens knew how many people envied this special position. But when I think that one day this position will be replaced by another girl, I feel a little unwilling. I lay down beside him, and as I hugged him, a bold thought popped into my head. Could I like him? As soon as this thought occurred to me, my whole body tensed up. The word like was too familiar. However, the word love was a little unfamiliar to him. Chapter 3108. I liked him, but I didn't know if this was love. Did it have anything to do with sex between men and women? My relationship with Suchi gradually grew closer. Perhaps, deep down, I hoped that someone would gradually replace Dongyu. I couldn't rely on him too much. I thought that perhaps my world was too small, so much so that other than my family, there was only him. I couldn't touch the outside world. Hence, all my obsessions were only related to him. Then what about trying to touch others? Xiachuan. Every time school ended, Suchi's handsome smiling face would appear in front of me on time. I always used to put my bag in his basket, then get into his back seat and let him drive me home. But that day, I flunked my exam and was in a bad mood after being scolded. I was frowning at the thought of not knowing how to explain myself when I got home. Tomorrow is Saturday. You don't have to rush home today, do you? Come and have fun with me. It's getting late. I'm going home. I hugged my exam papers and turned around to leave. I walked past him coldly and headed home. Suchi also noticed that something was wrong with my expression. He caught up with me on his bike and asked, What's wrong? Are you in a bad mood? I glared at him, wanting to cry. Some people are born with a talent for reading, such as Dongyu and Suchi. Even if they don't pay much attention in class, they can still learn a lot of homework by flipping through the books. But I don't seem to be such a genius. Hence, in the monthly exam a few days later, I did my best to rank among the top few in class and failed 3 out of 5 subjects. I was just in the bottom few. The bottom few students had to be announced to the whole class. I was dragged to the podium in the spotlight and was criticized along with the other students who had failed the exam. We returned to our seats with our tails between our legs. I was so ashamed that I almost shed tears. Hence, when I saw Suchi's bright smile at the school gate, I was in no mood to talk to him. Suchi walked over and took the exam paper from my arms when I wasn't paying attention. I took a closer look and saw the huge 58 on it. It was extremely glaring. "You only scored 58 in math?" I said angrily. "What does it have to do with you? Give it back to me." Suchi dodged and switched to the language paper. 67 marks? It's so easy to memorize junior high language, yet you only got such a low score? Suchi. I stomped my feet, my face turning even redder. Suchi took the bag from me and said, "Get in the car." "Where to?" "To give you extra lessons." Suchi added, "I've made an appointment with Dongyu." I was stunned for a moment. When I heard that Dongyu was there, I got into his car. Ever since I came home late that time, I didn't expect Dongyu and Suchi to become friends. I guess Dongyu probably felt that since he couldn't chase Suchi away from me, then becoming friends with him was a form of protection in disguise. The two of them had similar personalities. One was as passionate as fire, while the other was as calm as ice. They usually played basketball together after class, so they got along pretty well. After I failed the monthly exam, Dongyu and Suchi took turns tutoring me. Initially, the tutoring location was set up in the library. However, for some reason, whenever Dongyu and Suchi appeared together, the library would become noisy. Chapter 3109. Being sandwiched between the two school hunks of E High School, I felt like there were many pairs of eyes staring at me from behind. Hence, he decided to tutor me at Suchi's house. The first time I went to Suchi's house, it was in a high-end apartment next to E High School. It was more than 160 square meters. At that time, the average price of land was more than 30,000 yuan. Every inch of land was worth gold. Such an apartment was considered a mansion. It was such a big apartment, but he lived alone. Usually, the nanny would cook for him and take care of his daily life. Suchi preferred silence, so other than the fixed cleaning time, he was the only one at home. He said that his parents were busy with their business and were rarely at home, so he lived alone. His living room was very big, more than 50 square meters. At that time, all kinds of game consoles were still rare, but it was commonplace in his house. There were all kinds of games. While I was revising, Dongyu and Suchi were playing games with the game controllers. I watched from the side, envious. The taste of tutoring was especially boring. During that period, I was cut off from eating, drinking, and having fun. I remembered that at that time, there was a Japanese-themed haunted house that opened at Ocean Department Store. Business was in full swing and its reputation was exceptionally good. Many young students sought excitement. After a trip to the haunted house, they said that they hadn't had enough. It was very interesting, scary, and exciting. They highly recommended it and even formed cliques. I was afraid of ghosts, but I was very curious about ghosts and gods. Since I was young, I liked to drag Dongyu to watch ghost movies. Hence, I suggested that we go to the haunted house together. However, Dongyu countered, "If you get into the top 10 in the next monthly exam, I'll take you there." Suchi added, "As long as you do well, I'll treat you." I withered. "What if I don't do well?" Dongyu said coldly, "Then there's no chance." I bit the end of my pen. My ambition was finally ignited and I worked even harder in my tutoring. However, how should I put it? With ambition comes motivation. After the results of the mid-semester monthly exam, although I wasn't close to the top 10, I was 0.5 points behind the 10th place. Dongyu wasn't unreasonable. On the weekend, I made an appointment with Suchi to go to the haunted house together. After buying the tickets, I was a little timid and didn't dare to go in. Seeing my timid look, Suchi couldn't help but laugh at me. "You were the one who said you wanted to come and have fun. In the end, you hid at the door and didn't dare to enter. What's the meaning of this?" Dongyu said, "She's afraid. She's especially afraid of ghosts." Suchi said, "You dare to challenge a haunted house when you're afraid of ghosts?" I couldn't take it lying down. Who said I was scared? The slogan was loud and clear, but I still didn't dare to step in. Suchi ran out of patience and walked over to take my hand. I flinched and avoided his hand. I snorted and said, "I'm here. Don't walk in front." Then I'll have you walk in the middle. As Dongyu spoke, he took my hand and led the way. For some reason, the moment he held my hand, I felt that the pitch-black door, which was like an endless abyss, was no longer that terrifying. I mustered up my courage and followed him. Suchi, who was behind him, was stunned for a few seconds. He only followed after the staff urged him. Chapter 31:10. As we passed by a hospital bed, a staff member with disheveled hair, dressed as Sadako, suddenly let out a sinister cry at me. I was so frightened that I hugged Dongyu's back tightly and shouted as I squeezed past him to move forward. Dongyu and Suchi were calm. They probably knew that this was all fake and it was difficult for them to get into character. However, I screamed the entire time. When I walked out of the exit, I fell to the ground as if I had just survived a disaster. When I realized that I had escaped, I was still in a state of shock. Tears streamed down my face as I cried bitterly. Dongyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He hugged my shoulders and patted my back, comforting me. All right. Don't be afraid anymore. You're not in there anymore and you're still crying? You're really something. His heart ached and he found it funny. Suchi was convulsing with laughter at the side. He was probably amused by my crying face. Beside me, a girl in a staff uniform walked over and asked weakly, "Are you a student of second high?" I looked up and saw her looking at the uniform I was wearing. She nodded with tears in her eyes. Seeing my tears, she handed me a tissue and smiled helplessly. "Is the haunted house that scary?" "Yes." I nodded. Then she said, "My name is Han Xiao. I'm also a student of second high. I'm in year 1, class 9. What about you?" When I heard this, I immediately forgot to cry. I said in surprise, "You're in second high too?" Han Xiao was the first and only close friend I had in my middle school life. Later, she found out that her uncle had invested in the haunted house. She would come here on weekends to work part-time while she was still studying. At that time, it wasn't unusual for underage children to work. Furthermore, it was her family's business, so she didn't have any qualms. From then on, Han Xiao and I became very good friends. We talked about everything and were very close. I often dragged her to the basketball court at First High after school to watch Dongyu and Suchi play basketball. After that, we would go home together. We occupied the back seat of Dongyu and Suchi's bicycle. Most of the time, I would sit in the back seat of Dongyu's car. He was sweaty and sticky. Even though I was sweating profusely, I didn't hesitate to hug him. Sitting in the back seat, he watched the sun set in the west. The sunset fell on his body through the mottled shadows of the trees, as if he was plated with gold. At that time, everything was so beautiful. During the first long holiday of middle school, we agreed to go to Fragrant Hill to play in the water. Fragrant Mountain was a very small mountain, but what was famous about it was not the mountain, but the huge lake beside the mountain. It was so clear that one could see the bottom. At that time, although clear lake water was common, there weren't many places where one could get close to water. The lake was connected to the shore and the lake water overflowed the shore. I liked to walk on the shallow shore and watch the clear lake water submerge my ankles. It was so comfortable. At noon, they spread out a tablecloth by the shore and placed the snacks they brought on the tablecloth. Han Xiao seemed to be a little uncomfortable. Seeing that her face was a little pale, I asked a few questions with concern. She seemed a little awkward and a little shy. She only said that her stomach was not feeling well. But at that time, I didn't understand the process that girls had to go through during their puberty. Chapter 31:11. Brother. Brother? After a few syllables, another wave of pain hit me. I immediately sobered up and realized that it was Saturday and the school was closed. Dongyu had gone to school for class. High school was a heavy workload. As a top student in the top class, Dongyu would attend classes every Saturday and weekend morning. He was still in his second year of high school, but he was already working hard on the college entrance examination. Every year, the college entrance examination was a reshuffling of fate. If the college entrance examination went smoothly, it might mean that the future of one's life would be smooth sailing. At least for the high school students of that period, the college entrance examination was an extremely heavy word filled with hope and pain. There was no one at home. I sat up in bed, clutching my stomach. I moved my body and immediately realized that there was something strange about the bedsheets. I lifted the blanket with difficulty and moved my legs, only to realize that there was a faint red stain on the bedsheets. It was extremely eye-catching. Blood? Why was there blood? I was scared out of my wits. I didn't know what had happened to my body. I was fine last night. Why was I bleeding when I woke up? I couldn't figure out where the blood came from. Clutching my stomach, I rushed into the bathroom. When I took off my pants, I saw a bloody stain on them. My eyes widened as if I'd been struck by lightning. For a moment, blood cancer, leukemia, all sorts of terrifying words lingered in my mind. Don't tell me. I've contracted some kind of terminal illness. At the thought of this possibility, I fell onto the toilet. All the blood in my body flowed to the top of my head and I felt dizzy. What should I do? What should I do? I was anxious and restless. I felt suffocated at the thought that I might have contracted some kind of terminal illness. Thinking further, if I were to die from a terminal illness, what would happen to Dongyu? At noon, Dongyu returned home from school. I was still hiding in the bathroom, clutching my stomach and sobbing. When I heard his footsteps, I stood up helplessly and opened the door. He was about to look for me when he saw me suddenly appear at the bathroom door. He was shocked. When he saw that my eyes were red and my face was wet with tears, he looked even more puzzled. What's wrong? Brother? I clutched my stomach in pain and groaned a few times. Although I couldn't see my face, it must have been extremely pale and distorted because I saw that Dongyu was at a loss. What's going on? When he came closer, he saw the blood dripping from my body. The color drained from his face. Hang in there, I'll send you to the hospital right away. He carried me in his arms and rushed downstairs. He didn't even have time to catch his breath as he ran to the side of the road and got into a taxi. He said to the driver, "Driver, go to the First People's Hospital now." The driver was scared out of his wits. He thought that I was about to die, so he stepped on the accelerator and sped toward the hospital. He even ran several red lights. When we arrived at the hospital, Dongyu couldn't even make it in time to register. He carried me into the emergency room and said nervously to the doctor, "Doctor, please save my sister. She lost a lot of blood," and kept crying out in pain to me. The doctor also walked over anxiously. Seeing my pale face, he furrowed his brows. Then he saw that my pants were stained with blood. His expression became complicated. Chapter 31:12. How old are you? I said, 14 years old in the second year of junior high school. Where does it hurt? My stomach hurts, I cried. Doctor, am I dying? I've lost a lot of blood. The doctor frowned and asked Dongyu to put me on the bed. After chasing Dongyu out, he sat down and said meaningfully, "Young lady, did your mother never tell you what menarche is?" The muscles on the doctor's face twitched violently again as he calmly explained. It turned out that this wasn't a terminal illness. It was a period that all girls would experience when they reached puberty. It was commonly known as ant flow. Every month it would come on time. This was a necessary process for a girl to evolve into a woman. After saying that, the doctor smiled, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Terminal illness? Young lady, you've been watching too many television dramas, haven't you? I was so embarrassed that my face turned red and I was at a loss. However, my mother and I didn't talk much about this. She didn't tell me what kind of changes a girl's body would undergo when she reached puberty. My mother seemed very concerned about Dongyu, but she seemed a little cold to me. My father was a typical male chauvinist. He wasn't good with words and he wouldn't show me much concern. So much so that when I opened the door and saw Dongyu pacing back and forth, I didn't know what to say. This wasn't a terminal illness, but an ordinary menstrual period. On the way back, Dongyu also looked embarrassed. He looked at me and then at the bag in my hand. Inside the bag were the Sophie sanitary pads he'd bought from the supermarket. The first pack of sanitary pads in my life was chosen for me by Dongyu. I blushed as I followed behind him and watched him pick out the sanitary pads from the shelf. The shop assistant recommended Sophie, and he paid for a few packs without thinking. That night, when my mother came back and found out about this, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That was why she taught me about this. The reason my stomach hurt so much was probably because I ate a few popsicles without restraint the night before. During menstruation, one shouldn't touch anything cold. The first lesson taught me a harsh lesson. In the first semester of the second year of junior high school, just as I was preparing for the monthly exam, bad news came from my hometown. Grandma was seriously ill. The doctor issued a notice of critical illness and told my father that the old lady's time was up. After bringing Grandma home from the hospital, her last wish was to see me and Dongyu one last time. I vaguely remember that it was a snowy night. It had rained the day before, and the cold air had frozen all the water on the road into ice. My father drove us all the way home at a speed of 60 miles per hour. I sat in the back seat, tears streaming down my face. Dongyu put his arm around my shoulder, his expression grave. He was usually reserved, but when he found out that Grandma was seriously ill, he was worried. I saw that his eyes were red too. The family of 4 rushed back to their hometown. Dongyu and I rushed to the sickbed. Grandma took one last look at us and finally smiled in relief. She finally let out the last breath that was stuck in her throat. Then she breathed her last. When she closed her eyes, that old hand that was like a withered tree was still holding my hand tightly. I couldn't accept the fact and broke down crying. Dongyu also knelt heavily beside her. He lowered his head and wept. Chapter 31:13. A suffocating pain enveloped me. For the first time in my life I realized that my heart could really hurt. It was a kind of pain that made one feel suffocated, helpless, and at a loss. On the night of Grandma's death, the family was busy with the funeral, while Dongyu slept with me in the small room upstairs. I couldn't close my eyes for the entire night. Tears kept streaming down my face as I hugged Grandma's large fan and cried until the sky turned dark. I remember this big cattail leaf fan. When I was young, when the weather was hot, my grandmother would stay by my bedside and fan us tirelessly over and over again until we fell asleep. When I went upstairs I saw it and my heart almost broke. Dongyu hugged me, not knowing how to comfort me. Even he was in a heavy mood because of Grandma's death. As if affected by my emotions, he also shed tears. "Xiaochuan, don't cry, okay?" He comforted me gently and held me in his arms as if he was coaxing a child. I didn't know how to respond to him. Although I didn't make a sound, my tears never stopped. He probably felt his heart ache. He held my face and carefully pecked away the tears from the corners of my eyes. Because of this kiss I was shocked. My heart, which had been calm and unremarkable, suddenly raced. In the darkness, Dongyu didn't seem to notice anything strange about me, but he also sensed that I was no longer crying. He also knew that this kind of comfort seemed to be able to calm my emotions for a short time. He held my face and gently kissed away my tears, just like he did when we were young. When I was young, I was especially fond of crying. This was how Dongyu comforted me. Little did he know that when he grew up, such actions added to the ambiguity between a man and a woman. My heart was beating faster, but I was willing to be comforted by him like this. Subconsciously, I wrapped my arms around his waist. When I hugged him just now, he seemed to have woken up. He looked up slightly and met my eyes. I couldn't see the expression on his face and he couldn't see the emotions in my eyes. He only smiled softly and said, "Little fool, don't cry. Grandma is gone and I'll be with you. Can you stay with me forever? I promised Grandma to take good care of you." This wasn't the kind of care I wanted. This blockhead of his didn't seem to understand what I was talking about. Later, I realized that perhaps Dongyu had already understood at that time. However, he deliberately avoided it and didn't respond. Just like when I was young, I stubbornly pursued the answer. But Dongyu had long known that some things, once they were clarified, they weren't the outcome he wanted to see. Some things would be less painful if they were vague and one would not have to face a cruel choice. He built a utopian world, hoping that these two feelings could coexist. That night, he held me in his arms and stayed with me the whole night until I calmed down. After the funeral, in order to thank the relatives who had helped at the funeral, Dad booked a private room in the hotel and treated them to a meal. On such occasions, Dongyu was always the center of attention. Chapter 31:14. Mom? The girl sitting at the side blushed and looked around shyly. Finally, her gaze landed on Dongyu. She pouted, but her eyes couldn't hide her adoration. Actually, such a joke couldn't be more normal. However, I didn't like it very much so that I didn't look happy the entire time. I was uneasy to realize that Dongyu and I were not destined to be bound together. Just as he said back then, maintaining this relationship would remain the same for the rest of our lives. And a third party was bound to barge in between us. The thought of this third party unscrupulously occupying his arms, his chest, his love, and that he wouldn't only have eyes for me. His care and protection wouldn't only be limited to me, made me fall into an unprecedented panic. What made me even more uneasy was that I was actually extremely repulsed by this possibility. I even felt a deep hatred for this third party who had yet to appear. I knew that it was ridiculous for me to think this way. Dongyu and I were destined to be impossible. This forbidden love had an ending from the very beginning. It was destined to never be fulfilled. However, I still harbored a pitiful and humble hope, trying to find a way to break through this wall. However, every time I saw my parents' faces, I couldn't suppress the guilt in my heart. I thought that I must be hopeless. Even so, I couldn't escape this torture. Hence, for a long time, I fell into this vicious cycle. I was haunted day and night and couldn't get out of it no matter what. I thought that I had been ill for a long time and couldn't recover. Other than Dongyu, no one could cure me. I had also tried to let others into my world, but I sadly realized that it was like my world was shackled. It was just that no one could break that shackle no matter how hard they tried. At the beginning of my life, Dongyu was my only faith. Even though the world was barren, I only wanted him to be by my side. I realized that my feelings for him were getting harder and harder to suppress. When I was in my second year of secondary school, it happened to be the 50th anniversary of second high school. There was going to be a cultural performance and the class was collecting performances. I was forced to sign up, probably because the music teacher knew that I could play the piano well, so he strongly recommended me to perform. I didn't know why, but I agreed. Because the teacher said that if I participated in the talent show, I would get extra credits. At that time, credits were also an important consideration. After signing up, I had another excuse to pester Dongyu every night. He was a little surprised when he found out that I was participating in the school's talent show. Dongyu had been learning to play the piano since he was young. As his sparring partner, I watched him from the side and would occasionally pester him to teach me how to play the piano. Although my technique wasn't that professional, Dongyu said that this blockhead of mine had some talent in music. Whatever I do, I always have a bit of passion. When it comes to the piano, I don't know if it's because of my love for the piano or some other reason, but I actually persisted for a long time. That month, I practiced the guqin especially hard. Dongyu chose a song for me. I wasn't particularly obsessed with etudes and elegant songs that were too artistic. Hence, I chose a nice but simple song, Lin Junjie's Jiangnan. Chapter 31:15. But with less than 2 weeks to go before the school's anniversary celebration, I started to feel nervous. I'd heard that the school's anniversary celebration would be held in the school's newly built arts hall. I had a deep impression of this hall. Occasionally, when I was on duty to clean up, I was amazed by the magnificent hall. The hall was large enough to accommodate thousands of people. It was said that during the school's anniversary celebration, the entire school's teachers and students would be present. I couldn't help but feel nervous. When I thought about the upcoming anniversary celebration, I would make mistakes when practicing the piano. A week before the school's anniversary celebration, in the middle of the night, I was awakened by Dongyu's anxious voice. When I opened my eyes, I saw that he was fully dressed and squatting by the bed. Under the moonlight, his eyes were as beautiful and bright as obsidian. "What are you doing?" I rubbed my eyes and muttered, "It's so late and you're still awake? Let's go. I'll take you somewhere." "What place?" He flicked my head. "Don't ask so many questions. Hurry up and get dressed." His mysterious look made me nervous. I hurriedly put on my clothes. He took my hand and tiptoed out of the door. When we left home, the night was dark and there were no stars in the sky. He wheeled his bicycle and drove me all the way to Yigao. When the car stopped at the entrance of Yigao, I couldn't help but be surprised. I asked in surprise, "Why did you bring me here?" "Remember? I've mentioned to you before that there's a beautiful tripod piano in our school's music classroom." I was bewildered. Finally, I understood his intention. "Didn't you want to play the grand piano? Usually, students aren't allowed to touch this piano unless there's a performance. It's inconvenient to have a teacher around during the day. I'll take you here to practice at night." As he spoke, he turned and asked, "Are you sleepy?" "No." I shook my head and asked worriedly, "But the school's music classroom usually locks the doors and windows." Dongyu couldn't help but smile smugly, revealing his snow-white teeth. "It's my turn to be on duty today." I was still puzzled and didn't react. He leaned close to my ear and whispered, "There's a window that I secretly left unlocked. Later, I'll climb through the window and open the door for you." I was instantly excited. This fellow was quite clever in his little tricks. But I was still a little worried. Is there no teacher on duty in the school? If they hear the sound of the zither, they'll definitely discover us, right? I've asked around. Usually, the teachers on duty who are in charge of patrolling the building have already returned to the dormitory to rest at this time. Only the security guards are guarding the door at this time. However, the security room and the music room are far apart, so they won't find out. As Dongyu spoke, he led me through the back door of the school. My eyesight is not very good at night and I have night blindness. Dongyu held my hand and we walked in the dark to the music building. I turned around and looked around. In the school, all the lights were turned off. I couldn't even see my fingers in front of me. The empty corridor and the dark doors and windows formed a sharp contrast with the lively scene during the day. I was a little afraid of the dark. I kept feeling that such an environment was too scary. I thought of something terrifying and couldn't help but shudder. I walked even closer to Dongyu. It was said that a person's imagination was the most terrifying thing. Chapter 31:16. I often read horror magazines on the streets. At this moment, when the contents of those ghost stories flooded my mind, I became even more nervous. He sensed my rapid breathing and couldn't help but smile. "Are you that afraid of the dark? Dongyu, do you believe that there are ghosts in this world?" As soon as I asked, I was frightened by my own imagination. A pale ghost face seemed to flash before my eyes. I was so scared that I didn't dare to mention this word again. Dongyu smiled. If I told you that I believe in ghosts in this world, would you be even more afraid? When I heard this, I almost screamed, "Don't scare me. You're clearly scaring yourself." As Dongyu said this, he rubbed my head. "Alright, don't scare yourself. There really is a ghost. I'll definitely leave you behind and run." I panicked even more and wanted to cry. "Let's not talk about this anymore. Stop. He was amused by me and didn't mention it again. We snuck into the music classroom floor. Dongyu approached the bed and carefully opened the window. He pulled open the curtains and peered inside. The moonlight shone into the music classroom, bright and beautiful. He looked around cautiously, his expression guarded. I leaned against his side warily and looked at the corner of the corridor without blinking. I had a feeling that something would suddenly appear in the next second. I curled up into a small ball and carefully tugged at his sleeve. "Brother, are you sure it's okay?" "Yes." The teacher on duty should have returned to the dormitory to rest. "There's no one in the music building," Dongyu said in a low voice. Then he shot me a look. "Wait for me outside the door, okay? I'll climb in and open the door for you." "No." I grabbed his sleeve tightly. "Are you going to leave me outside alone? I didn't expect you to be so timid." "What? Are you afraid that something will suddenly appear and eat you?" "Ah!" I screamed in fright. Dongyu quickly covered my lips nervously and pressed his finger against them. "Idiot! Are you trying to lure the security guards here? Who asked you to scare me?" Dongyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Don't be afraid, okay? Wait for me for a while. I'll be quick." "All right then," I compromised a little and nodded obediently. "Be careful." Dongyu held onto the edge of the window and leaped onto the windowsill. He nimbly flipped into the classroom. I walked to the door anxiously. I was so nervous that my heart raced. Soon the classroom door opened from the inside. I squeezed through the gap and saw his bright smile. My heart gradually calmed down. Dongyu closed the door and turned around. I hugged his shoulders excitedly and cheered, "Big brother is the best." Ch. He was afraid that I would make too much noise, so he flicked my forehead with his finger. "Lower your voice." "Ouch, it hurts." I covered my forehead and glared at him coquettishly. He exchanged glances with me. Then he moved to close all the curtains in the music room and turned on a light. The warm light shone on a beautiful and elegant Yamaha tripod piano. Wow! What a beautiful piano! Chapter 31:17. I covered my mouth and sighed in admiration. I circled the piano several times in amazement. This piano fulfilled all my romantic fantasies about music as a young girl. When Dongyu was practicing the zither from a young age, I liked to sit by his side and watch him play the boring music over and over again in a daze. However, I didn't find it boring to practice with him. I liked his hands on the piano keys the most. His fingers were long and slender, and his fingertips were like porcelain. Against the black and white keys, they were extremely beautiful. Every afternoon, the sunlight outside the window would shine in and reflect on his handsome side profile. Against the light, it was quiet and beautiful. I wasn't born with a love for the piano. My obsession with the piano stemmed more from my infatuation with him. He looked at me circling the piano with his hands in his trouser pockets helplessly. I looked up at him and saw a warm and doting smile on his lips. "Brother, how much does this piano cost?" It was probably because I was touching the piano's frame devoutly like a believer praying. The longing expression on my face was too amusing. He chuckled and then frowned seriously. "It's very expensive." I was getting more and more curious. "How expensive is it?" Dongyu thought for a moment and said, "About 200,000 yuan. I was completely stunned. 200,000 yuan? It was an astronomical figure. He saw my eyes widen like copper bells and my expression of disbelief. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "This piano is a Yamaha. It's specially made for performance. The sound must be great. When is the school anniversary performance scheduled?" "In a week." Dongyu frowned. "Time is tight. Are you familiar with the tune?" "I've learned it, but there are some parts where I still need to consolidate the fingering. I was just an amateur at playing the piano. I hadn't practiced since I was a child. When I was young, when Dongyu played the piano, I would sit next to him and practice with him. I liked it the most when he taught me step by step. His gentle eyes made me indulge in it." "Where is the problem with the fingering?" Dongyu sat on the piano stool and patted it. "Come here and sit next to me." "Okay." I walked over and sat down. He said, "Play it for me first." "All right." I lowered my head and played seriously. From time to time he would ask me to stop. He would lower his head and adjust my hand to the correct technique. But unknowingly my mind was no longer on the piano. Instead, I kept staring at the side of his face, lost in thought. I couldn't help but recall that I had once asked Han Xiao how it felt to like someone. She replied that her heart was beating like thunder when she met him, and her heart was filled with joy. When he touched her, his breathing became hot and he fidgeted. That was liking her. I know I like him out of control. Especially when looking at him so calmly, it was as if 10,000 years had passed and time had stopped. He looked up. Halfway through his sentence, he saw me staring at the side of his face. He was stunned. What's wrong? No, nothing. I retracted my gaze in embarrassment, feeling a little guilty. Dongyu smiled. Okay, let's continue then. Chapter 31:18. He used so much force that even his expression froze. He could clearly feel my trembling fingertips and was shocked beyond words. His palms were also covered in cold sweat and his knuckles were white. I hesitated again and again. Suddenly, I stared straight at him and mustered up my courage to plead, "Brother, let's always be together, okay?" Dongyu was stunned and a trace of surprise flashed across his eyes. His eyes met mine briefly and he quickly looked away. He lowered his head and did not say a word. When I saw his silence, it was as if a thorn had pierced my heart. I felt a little suffocated. Brother, I hate it when you're with other girls. I've imagined you dating other girls, hugging, dating, kissing. I can't accept it. It's like the end of the world. Let's be together forever and neither of us will leave. Just like we promised when we were young, let's be together, okay? 100 years, a lifetime together. My tone was humble and pleading. I was flustered and helpless. I was hoping that he would gently pull me into his arms like he did when we were young and promise me, okay, we'll be together forever. But he didn't. He only reached out his other hand with a trembling hand and pried my fingers apart one by one. When he looked up at me, his face was pale and helpless. Be good, stop fooling around, okay? I'm not fooling around. I'm obviously very serious. Can't you tell? Can't you tell? I approached him seriously and said anxiously, I want to be with you forever, brother. Didn't we agree? Xiaochuan, we're siblings. One day I'll have a girl I love. She'll become my wife and spend the rest of my life with me. The one who'll be with me forever is that girl, not you. Do you understand? I don't understand. My face instantly burned as I questioned him. Why? Why can't I? When I heard these words coming out of his mouth, it was extremely cruel. My heart ached like a piercing needle and I couldn't see clearly. I clenched my fists tightly. Despair seemed to drown me. I asked, then what did you promise me in the past? Was it a lie? We made a promise. He turned his face away with a complicated expression, lowered his head and stared straight at the black and white piano keys. He pretended to be calm and said, I promised you that I would be with you for the rest of my life and never leave you, but not in this way. Do you understand? The air suddenly became deathly silent. I saw him frowning. His face was dark and gloomy as if he was trying to avoid me. While I was unconscious, I couldn't help but reach out and clasp his wrist tightly. He turned his head in surprise, but I couldn't control myself and moved closer to him. I held his shoulder and kissed him clumsily. When she was young, she loved to watch those romantic and sweet idol dramas. Every time it was the kissing segment, she would watch the scene of the male and female lead kissing on the TV screen and her heart would beat faster. I followed what I saw on TV and held his face. I gently closed my eyes and traced his thin lips with my lips. Chapter 31:19. There was an inexplicable fragrance on his body. It wasn't the smell of perfume but the light fragrance of laundry detergent. The moment my lips touched his, my mind went blank. All I knew was that I hugged his shoulders fiercely and deepened the kiss, longing for the warmth of his lips. I had thought that he would struggle and resist, and then push me away forcefully to break this out-of-control situation. But he didn't. I saw him open his eyes in a daze. Many complicated emotions flashed across his face. Then he closed his eyes subconsciously, his shoulders trembling. I was even more nervous. My eyelashes fluttered, and the corners of my eyes felt sour, as if tears were falling. Perhaps he could sense my despair, but he couldn't help but reach out and try to hug me. I yearned for him. What about him? Did he yearn for me as well? But in the next second he was stunned and pushed me away forcefully. Caught off guard, my body tilted and I fell onto the piano. His elbow pressed hard against the black and white keys, producing an extremely discordant chord. It was ear-piercing and heavy. I looked up and saw him suddenly turn around. Under the moonlight, his face was a little pale and he felt ridiculous and shocked. I had never seen him like this before. I stood up awkwardly and helplessly. The corners of my lips twitched and I said with trembling lips, "Brother, why did you push me away?" He wiped his lips with a blank gaze. There was still the residual warmth of my first kiss there. Dongyu turned around abruptly and questioned me, "Ridiculous? In Xiachuan, do you know what you're doing?" "How is it ridiculous? How is it ridiculous?" My throat tightened. I got up from the piano stool and walked behind him. I reached out and carefully tugged at the corner of his shirt, as if I had done something wrong when we were young, and guiltily begged for his forgiveness. "Brother, can't I kiss you?" "You can't." Dongyu shook off my hand uncontrollably and walked to the window. He said in a low voice, "I can't either." "Why not?" I couldn't help but cry. I said aggrievedly, "I like you and you like me. Isn't that enough?" I shouted the last sentence with all my might, almost breaking my voice. He suddenly turned around and walked up to me. He held my shoulders tightly. His eyes were bloodshot as he said crazily, "You are my sister and I am your brother. Don't you understand? It's impossible. Do you really not understand?" "Why?" I didn't understand and continued to ask. "I can't do without you. The same blood flows in our bodies. We're brother and sister. If we really get together, it'll be like asterisk asterisk asterisk. Do you understand?" He stared at me as if trying to wake me up. I suddenly laughed, feeling sad. I extended my hand and held his wrist. I placed my hand over his wrist and questioned him, "Is this the reason?" I stared at him with teary eyes and said humbly, "If that's the reason, then I'll cut it open with a knife and let all the blood in my body flow out. Will that do?" "Shut up." Dongyu turned pale with fright and covered my lips tightly. "You're threatening me, aren't you?" I saw the unconcealed heartache on his face and broke down completely. I threw myself into his arms and cried helplessly. How would I dare to threaten him? Chapter 31:20. "But I don't want you to be with another girl. My heart will ache, my heart will ache. Brother, I just like you. There's nothing I can do about it. Wouldn't it be great if I could control it? But there's no way to control liking you." His body stiffened as if he had suddenly run out of energy. His arms fell weakly to his sides. He looked up, wanting to hug me, but he didn't dare to touch me. When I saw his helpless expression, my heart ached. Tears slid into the corners of my lips, bitter and astringent. "When I was young, I was so glad that you were my brother. I had the best brother in the world. But now, I don't want you to be my brother at all. Don't cry, okay?" Dongyu held my face and gently wiped away the tears from the corners of my eyes. Even he didn't notice the heartache in his eyes. When he saw that I was crying, his eyes turned red as well. He had never been good at expressing emotions. Regardless of whether he was happy or sad, he always had a calm and composed expression. He wanted to hug me, but he didn't dare to reach out to touch me. He wanted to hold my hand, but he couldn't muster the courage. He once said that no matter what we faced, we had to have courage and press forward. But when I hugged him like a moth to a flame and said that I liked him, he couldn't muster up the courage to hug me back. Perhaps he understood, better than I did, that some courage was ultimately futile. If you wanted the moon in the sky, you wouldn't necessarily be able to pluck it with courage. Hence, some things were destined to be unattainable. Some love was destined to have no ending. That night, when I returned home, I sat on the back seat of the bicycle. However, instead of wrapping my arms around his waist like before, I gently tugged at the corner of his shirt. The evening breeze was getting stronger, making it difficult for me to open my eyes. I repeatedly thought about what Dongyu had said to me, but I didn't want to take a single word of it to heart. In those few days, Dongyu seemed to have become a little indifferent to me. He had never been so cold to me since I was young. Even when he came to pick me up after school, he was no longer as close to me as he used to be. He also stopped practicing the zither with me. Towards the end, there was a complicated chapter in the middle of Jiangnan that I couldn't master. I had no choice but to ask the teacher to change the song list. I changed it to a song that I was more confident in, Autumn Whisper. I was in a bad mood and didn't know what I had done wrong. Unknowingly, in my apprehension, the school's anniversary soon arrived. The night before, I was so nervous that I tossed and turned in bed. I couldn't sleep. I was looking forward to the school's anniversary celebration, but I was also nervous. The school anniversary was on the weekend. On this day, Second High School was open to the public. Even students from other schools could enter and visit the school. Suchi said that he would get a bunch of brothers to support me. I was amused when I heard that and asked if Dongyu was coming. He said that Dongyu was not coming because he had something to do. When I heard that, my mood turned gloomy again. So many days had passed, yet he was still avoiding me. Could it be that he was prepared to avoid me for the rest of his life? I was a little afraid that the distance between me and Dongyu would gradually drift apart. But I really didn't know that in this world he was the only person closest to me in my life. I can lose the world, but I can't lose him. Even if it was the same as before, it would be fine. Chapter 31:21. The students participating in the talent show had to go to the auditorium in advance to get used to the scene. The teachers would pay close attention to how to go on stage, how to introduce themselves, and even how to smile in front of the camera. Only then did I realize that there would be a video recording of the entire event. This made me even more nervous. At 4 in the afternoon, I stood in the magnificent auditorium and saw that the students had slowly entered. The art teacher had put on some light makeup for me. To go on stage, I wore the prettiest dress in my closet. As the opening song, I was in charge of taking the lead. Just as the performance was about to begin, I heard someone calling my name. When I turned around, I saw Suchi waving at me from the first row. I immediately saw the person standing beside him, looking at me silently. When Dongyu saw me, he suddenly stood up and stared at me nervously with anticipation in his eyes. Our eyes met briefly. Before I could say anything, the art teacher hurriedly pulled me over and said, "Xiaochuan, they're announcing. It'll be your turn soon." I nodded and hurried to the back of the stage. It wasn't until the host called my name that I finally reacted. The teacher was hurrying me and using the last few seconds to remind me. The most he said was nothing more than to tell me not to be nervous and to relax. When I walked onto the stage, it was pitch black below. Clap, clap. The stage lights fell at my feet. At that moment, I was surrounded by a blazing white light. The whole world was barren. I tensed up and hugged the microphone helplessly. I looked around but couldn't see anything. Finally, at the front of the stage, I saw him. His figure was against the light and I couldn't see his face clearly, but I knew it had to be him. "Hello everyone. I'm Xiaochuan from Year 2 Class 1. I'm very honored to be on this stage." Next I guessed that the art teacher, who was standing behind the scenes and staring at the stage, must be pounding his chest and stamping his feet in anger. Then he desperately lowered his voice and said, "Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous." But I couldn't hear or see anything. My heart was so nervous that it felt like it was about to jump out of my throat. I pressed my chest and finally, after calming down a little, I slowly said, "Hello everyone, I am Xiaochuan from the first class of the second year. I am very honored to be able to step on this beautiful stage. Next, I will be singing a piano piece, Autumn Whisper." The audience applauded. I turned around and gently covered my rapidly beating chest. I slowly walked to the tripod piano. When I sat down, my fingers accidentally touched the piano keys. Along with the microphone, the wrong syllable played a discordant melody. I frowned and suddenly took a deep breath. Once again, I gently stroked the piano keys. I imagined Dongyu sitting beside me. It was as if my nervous soul had finally been released. My 10 fingers formed a circle, and then the syllables flowed from my fingertips like flowing water. Smooth, soothing, tactful. Relatively speaking, the technique of this song was more difficult than that of Jiangnan. However, the advantage was that I had practiced this song for an entire year. After a little consolidation, I was so proficient that it was as if I had become one with the zither. Chapter 31:22. I immediately stood up. Below the stage, Dongyu suddenly walked onto the stage. Amidst the applause and cheers, he pulled me tightly into his arms. At that time, I felt that even with so many people in the auditorium and the surging applause, it couldn't compare to the warmth of his hug. After the performance, I was about to pack my things and go back with Dongyu. Dongyu and Suchi were waiting for me at the school gate. I thought that perhaps this celebration would be the best time for me to reconcile with Dongyu. Just as I reached the door, I saw Suchi waving at me. I walked over with a smile, only to see a few of my classmates walking towards me. When they saw me, they called out to me excitedly, "Xiaochuan, was that your boyfriend who hugged you on stage just now?" I was stunned. I followed their gazes and looked at Dongyu, only to hear them whispering excitedly, "So handsome. Xiaochuan, what's your boyfriend's name?" Suchi heard their discussion and immediately walked over. He said unhappily, "You guys seem to have misunderstood something, right? His name is Dongyu. He's not Xiaochuan's boyfriend. They're siblings, can't you tell?" "Bah. I thought he was Xiaochuan's boyfriend. So they're siblings? Xiaochuan, don't mind it." When Dongyu heard this, he turned his face away expressionlessly. I didn't feel good when I heard this. I didn't know what Dongyu was thinking. However, on the way home, Suchi was chatting and laughing, but he walked to the side without saying a word. Even when we got home, he didn't interact much with me. Instead, he returned to his room and locked the door. I stood outside his room in a daze for a long time before returning to my room in a daze. I originally hoped that as time passed, the tense relationship between us would be eased. However, time didn't bring about much change in our tense relationship. Instead, it brought about an unfamiliar girl. The first time I met that girl was on Dongyu's 16th birthday. That winter break, the weather was especially cold, so cold that it could freeze a person's heartbeat. At that time, people would usually book a table for their birthdays and invite a few good friends and classmates. After the meal, they would go to karaoke. Most of the time, their parents would be there on that day. They were more indulgent, so they could always go home very late. Dongyu's birthdays had always been celebrated at home because he didn't like too many people and lively environments. Dongyu said that he wanted to eat hot pot at home for his birthday. Early in the morning, I excitedly got out of bed and found the piggy bank on the desk. I smashed it and picked up the change one by one. There were even 2 10-kwai notes. I thought to myself that the pocket money I saved up for a year was finally going to be put to good use. When I was young, I always forgot to give Dongyu a present for his birthday. In my eyes, birthdays were meaningful as long as the family was together. However, after entering junior high school, the concept of birthday gifts gradually became clearer. After lunch, I took a bag of change and ran to the cake shop. I ordered a 10-inch birthday cake and repeatedly reminded them to write, "Happy Birthday to Dongyu" on it. I wasn't in a hurry to leave the shop. I waited for the whole afternoon until the cake was ready. I counted the candles and took the cake home. Chapter 31:23. I had never seen this girl before. She was thin and tall, with a delicate face and a sweet smile. She was wearing a pure white dress. "Dongyu?" I ran over and hid the cake behind me. I walked up to him and asked curiously, "Who is she?" Dongyu glanced at me, his expression inexplicably uneasy. The girl glanced at me and introduced herself graciously. "You're Dongyu's sister, aren't you?" "Yes, I am." "Hello." She smiled and extended her hand to me. "I'm Dongyu's girlfriend. I'm in the same grade as him." "Girlfriend?" I sized her up in shock. It was obvious that I didn't believe her one-sided story. I didn't respond immediately to her outstretched hand. Instead, I stared at her in a daze, at a loss. "Linley, this is my sister. Her name is Xiachuan." Dongyu introduced her and then said to me, "Xiachuan, this is my girlfriend. Her name is Linley." "Your girlfriend?" I couldn't believe it, so much so that I looked a little embarrassed. Dongyu's expression turned uneasy when he saw my sorry state. Linley didn't feel uncomfortable at all. Instead, she smiled and said, "Am I not liked by her?" Dongyu smiled. "How can that be? She's just a little shy." "Shy, that's right. I was indeed shy. Especially when it came to this girlfriend of mine, I was caught off guard." Perhaps sensing that the atmosphere was too tense, Dongyu hurriedly said to her, "Let's go upstairs first." Then he said to me, "Hurry up and go upstairs too. We have to prepare the hot pot. Mom and Dad won't be home tonight. You have to keep this a secret." He raised a finger to his lips and winked at me. I watched in a daze as he went upstairs and stood there motionless. I didn't know why I was so stubborn at that time, standing there foolishly for so long. Perhaps I was thinking that if Dongyu hadn't seen me go upstairs, would he have come down to look for me? He was so meticulous. Would he have been able to tell that I was unhappy? Would he have coaxed me gently like before and then told me that he was lying to me? I stood there foolishly and didn't go upstairs until Suchi arrived. He parked the car and found me standing there motionless. He walked over and patted me on the shoulder. "Why didn't you go upstairs?" At his reminder, I snapped back to reality. I looked up at the sky. Before I knew it, it was already dusk. I stood there foolishly for 2 hours. Seeing that I was still in a daze, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Looking at the cake in my hand, he quickly took it from my hand. Only then did I realize that my fingers were bleeding from the ribbon of the cake. "Let's go upstairs." As Suchi spoke, he reached for my hand. I quickly asked him, "Suchi, does Dongyu have a girlfriend?" Suchi did not look surprised. Instead, he asked matter-of-factly, "Don't you know?" I shook my head and asked him, "How long have you been talking?" "It's been about a month." "Oh," I replied. Only then did I realize why he had been coming home so late after school recently. I couldn't accept such a thing. Chapter 31:24. Suchi took my hand and led me upstairs. When we entered the house, Dongyu was in the kitchen, preparing the ingredients for the hot pot. Originally, I should have been very happy on my birthday. I was famous for my love of hot pot, especially the chicken soup base that Dongyu had concocted. It was delicious. However, standing in the kitchen I saw that other than Dongyu the girl was there as well. She stood beside Dongyu and helped him prepare the soup while she was in charge of the ingredients for the hot pot. The two of them were chatting and laughing in a harmonious manner. The kitchen was too small. With the two of us standing there was no room for a third person. However, the spot beside Dongyu that used to belong to me was now occupied by another girl. I felt a little suffocated. I placed the cake on the table with a numb expression. Just as I opened it, Linley walked out of the kitchen. When she saw me at the table, she quickly walked over and placed the cake on the sideboard. It's not time to eat the cake yet. The hot pot is almost ready. With that, she busied herself with her work. I looked at her, not knowing what to think. My mind was blank and many images flashed through my mind. Dongyu had said that sooner or later he would fall in love with a girl, get to know her, fall in love with her, and spend the rest of his life with her. That person couldn't possibly be me. Then, could she be that girl? So this was nothing. Ever since the last argument with him in the music room, our relationship had suddenly become a little stiff. He seemed to be deliberately avoiding me. No matter what I said to him, his attitude became much more indifferent than before. He was neither cold nor warm. He must be angry. I wanted to make him happy and try to break the tension between us. I originally thought that this birthday would definitely be able to ease the cold relationship between us a little. But I didn't expect such an accident to happen. Dongyu brought out the hot pot. After the four of us sat down, Suchi looked around and asked curiously, "Is it just the four of us?" "Yes." Dongyu nodded. "I don't like too many people." "I know you. You don't like noisy environments. It's good that the four of us are here. It's not bad to have a quiet birthday." Suchi clapped his hands. "Then let's dig in." Linley stood up and poured drinks for us. I sat in my seat with a numb expression. I didn't know what to think as I watched Linley put the ingredients into the pot and take them out one after another. She was a girl who knew how to take care of people. She took the initiative to pick up the ingredients for Dongyu. Seeing that I didn't move my chopsticks, she picked up a piece of beef for me and asked with a smile, "Why aren't you eating?" "Oh." I quickly picked up my chopsticks and looked at the hot pot. The steam blew into my eyes and I couldn't see clearly. "It's so hot." I rubbed my eyes, blinked and forced a smile. Dongyu suddenly looked up at me. However, he quickly turned around and smiled at Linley. I didn't know what he was saying. I found that my ears were suddenly not working properly. I could not hear what he was saying. The hot pot was quickly scooped clean. Suchi clutched her stomach and slumped into a chair, crying out, "I'm full." I quickly said, "I haven't eaten the cake yet." Linley also said, "I'm full too." "What to do? I can't eat any more." Suchi said, "At least blow out the candles and make a wish." Chapter 31:25. There's no need to blow out the candles. In any case, a wish won't come true. Lin Li's expression froze. "But people always ask for candles to make wishes on their birthdays." Dongyu said, "My family's tradition is to eat longevity noodles." "I see." I suddenly stood up and brought the cake to the table. Then I arranged the 16 candles in order. I didn't know what I was obsessed with. I lit the candles one by one with a lighter and said to Dongyu, "Dongyu, make a wish? Although your wish might not come true, perhaps it will come true one day?" Dongyu looked up and finally looked me in the eye. After a moment of silence, he smiled and said, "My wish will never come true." My smile froze. Suchi couldn't help but be curious. "What kind of wish is it that even you say, will never come true?" "Let me guess." Linley thought for a moment. "Get into a good university?" Suchi said, "With Dongyu's grades, it won't be difficult for him to get into a top-notch university. Is there a need to make a wish?" Linley guessed again. "Find a decent job in the future." Suchi said, "If he goes to a good university, will he still have to worry about a job?" Linley, don't make wild guesses. Dongyu is always unfathomable. Who knows what he's thinking all day long? I suddenly walked to the switch and turned off the lights. In the dining room, there was only the flickering light of the candles. Against Dongyu's face, his deep-set features looked inexplicably downcast. Suchi also said, "Hurry up and make a wish. Whether it comes true or not, you have to have a wish. Close your eyes. You must be sincere." Only then did Dongyu close his eyes. 5 seconds later, he blew out the candles with a whoosh. Suchi walked over and turned on the lights. He looked down and saw me standing there in a daze. He was stunned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." I regained my spirits and quickly said, "Let's cut the cake." Dongyu suddenly stood up. "I'm not eating anymore. Linley and I are going to the Lantern Festival in the park. Are you guys coming?" I realized that the Lantern Festival was approaching. There would be a Lantern Festival in the park. It would be beautiful. I'd always wanted to go with Dongyu. The night view would be beautiful. But my gaze fell on Lin Li with a complicated expression. Suchi did not think much of it. Lantern Festival? What's so interesting about the Lantern Festival? Today is your birthday, let's go sing. I also said, yeah, I want to sing. Lin Li said, I want to go to the Lantern Festival. This opportunity was hard to come by. Normally, there wouldn't be such an opportunity. It was only available during the Lantern Festival. Suchi Shachuan, let's go. I said, I don't want to go to the Lantern Fair. I don't want to see them walking hand in hand at the Lantern Fair. Usually, when I was this stubborn, Dongyu would be the first to compromise and take care of my emotions. However, that night he did not do so. Instead, he said, Suchi, accompany her to sing. Lin Li and I are going to the Lantern Festival. We have an appointment. He then said to Lin Li, let's wash the dishes before we go. Lin Li nodded, and the two of them carried the bowls and chopsticks into the kitchen, chatting and laughing as they began to wash the dishes. I suddenly realized that Dongyu's rare smile was no longer mine. When he looked at me, he no longer had that doting smile. Chapter 31:26. I sat in the dining room and silently watched the two of them wash the dishes in the kitchen. I suddenly remembered that when I was young, I was punished by my mother to do chores. In the kitchen, I would stand on a stool and wash the dishes alone. Dongyu would run over and join me. Originally, I hated washing dishes. It was so dry and boring. But because of him, I enjoyed the time of washing dishes. Once, when we were fooling around, he accidentally made foam all over my face and I accidentally ate more than half of it. The soap frothed in the water, and when it entered my mouth, it was bitter and astringent. Because of this bitterness, my face wrinkled. Dongyu went downstairs and used his remaining pocket money to buy a bottle of Coke. He urged me to drink it. I was forced to drink the whole can of Coke. At the last moment, he asked nervously, how is it? Is it still bitter? I stared at him for a long time before I suddenly opened my mouth and let out a loud burp. He was scared out of his wits, but when he saw me giggle foolishly, he leaned forward and sniffed in all seriousness. It smells like detergent. I was so angry that I chased after him. It's all your fault. If it weren't for you, would I have eaten the foam? He avoided me and teased me, who asked you to be so stupid? Little fool. Little fool. Don't call me little fool again. Little fool. The images gradually overlapped. I snapped out of my thoughts and saw that Dongyu and Lin Li had already set the table. They walked out, picked up their coats and were about to leave. I asked cautiously behind him, are you really not going to eat the cake? Dongyu didn't turn around. He only said lightly, I told you I don't like cake. With that, he took Lin Li's hand and left. The door closed with a bang, leaving Suchi and me standing there. My eyes reddened with grievance. I walked up to the table and looked at the cake. On it was written, Happy Birthday to Dongyu. Now that I thought about it, it was somewhat ironic. This cake is very expensive. I burst into tears. I saved up a year's worth of pocket money to buy this cake. Why did he say that he doesn't like cake? Is it because the cake is not good? When Suchi saw that I was crying, he immediately panicked. He walked over and quickly comforted me. Why are you crying? Just ignore him. He doesn't like it, but I do. Then he pulled me to sit down and divided the cake. Then he picked up a fork and started eating. Delicious. As he spoke, he looked at me. My hand that was holding the cake didn't move at all. My tears were dripping onto the cake. He didn't know what to do, so he came over and hugged my shoulders. Do you know that I'm most afraid of you crying? Whenever you cry, I'm always at a loss. Tell me, what should I do with you? He squatted in front of me and coaxed me. What do I have to do to stop you from crying? Suchi. My mouth trembled and my voice was as light as a feather. Take me to sing. Suchi was stunned, but nodded without hesitation. At that time, karaoke was a very trendy thing to do. For those of us who were studying at the time, karaoke rooms were very expensive. Just a private room alone cost more than 200 yuan. Some of the better ones cost more than 500 yuan. Chapter 31:27. It was also because of Suchi that I stepped into a karaoke room for the first time in my life. On Dongyu's birthday night, it was the second time. Compared to the nervousness of the first time sitting in the karaoke room with Suchi, I actually felt like an old man. I ordered a lot of songs, most of which were popular at the time. At that time, Jay Cho and Lin Junjia's songs were popular. I ordered I Still Miss Her, and held the microphone as I sang. Tears drown me who should be sad who let go of this relationship. I finally understand promises that can't be kept become shackles. Happiness is always in short supply in reality. Please tell her I don't love her. Smiling sadly I punish myself. Want to stop all the struggle. Harden my heart. Tell a heartfelt lie. Don't tell her I still miss her. Hate is easier to let go than love. When tears clog my chest, just let silence replace all the answers. This song existed in Dongyu's MP3 player for a long time. At that time I didn't understand why he liked this song. When I first heard it, the melody was nice and the lyrics were sad and beautiful. I was addicted to it and collected many of Lin Junjia's songs. I also became Lin Junjia's fan. However, after listening to so many songs, this was the only one I liked. I never got tired of listening to it. I don't love, I don't hurt, I don't understand. My heart has long been hollowed out, but my words are insincere. Please tell her I don't love her. Smiling sadly I punish myself. Want to stop all this struggle. Harden my heart. Tell a heartfelt lie. Don't tell her I still miss her. Hate is easier to let go than love. When tears clog my chest, just let silence replace all the answers. After singing this song, I suddenly felt that every word in the lyrics was almost heart-wrenching. I felt a sharp pain in my heart. I picked up a can of beer, pulled the tab and took a big gulp. Suchi looked at me silently. Perhaps he could tell that something was wrong with my mood today, but he couldn't understand my sadness. For a moment, he just sat silently beside me and put his arm around my shoulder. Ignore them. I said to him, let's sing our song. Suchi said, Shachuan, what's wrong? You drank so much, are you okay? What's this bit of wine? As I spoke, I took another sip. Finally he couldn't take it anymore. He pressed his hand against mine to stop me. Stop drinking. Are you here to sing or to drink? You ordered so many drinks. Isn't it a waste if you don't drink them? You don't have to finish everything you ordered. I put my arms around his shoulders without any explanation. At that moment, my head started to feel groggy because of the alcohol. I leaned very close to him. Leaning close to his face, I smiled and said, sing with me, okay? My breath reeked of alcohol. Okay. I heard that you sing very well. Sing a song for me. Suchi smiled and walked to the music machine. He chose a song. Perhaps he guessed that I liked Lin Junjia's songs, so he chose, I Really Wanna Love Her. It's raining. He's holding an umbrella beside you. But I wasn't happy. Because the smile on his face was very forced. I really wanna love her. But the eyes lie. It's easier to keep it a secret. Lest our feelings become complicated. I really wanna love her. But reason quarrels. Is it possible to quit? Who can give me a good answer? If I can't bear to, if this goes on, we're all victims. I really want to love her. But the eyes lie. It's easier to hide. Lest our feelings become responsible. I really want to love her. But reason quarrels. Is it possible to quit? Chapter 31:28. When love is on the verge of danger, we'll both be scarred, we'll both suffer unspeakably. I really want to love her, but the eyes are lying. It's easier to hide so as not to complicate my feelings. I really want to love her, but reason is arguing. Is it possible to withdraw? Who can give me a good answer? Oh, love teaches us that we can't let go. Love teaches us that we can't let go. I drank my beer in silence, but the beer that had gone into my mouth seemed to have gone into my eyes. My vision gradually became blurry and hazy, and I almost couldn't see clearly. I quickly rubbed my eyes and gulped down one can after another. Suchi was a little angry. He snatched the beer from my hand and said to me in an angry tone that he had never used before, you can't drink any more. I said, I want to drink more. I was sad. My heart felt like it was being blocked by something. I couldn't swallow or spit it out. I wondered if I would feel better if I got drunk. Even if it was just for one night, it would save me one night of suffering. I finally understood why some people liked to drink when they were sad. It wasn't because they were pretentious, but because it could cover up some pain and numb it appropriately. Although the pain would probably become clear again tomorrow, at least it would be better to have a few seconds less of suffering. Perhaps I had drunk too much, but I felt my stomach churn. I rushed to the bathroom, held the basin and retched, but nothing came out. Suchi walked over with the green tea. He unscrewed the lid and handed it to me. He said helplessly, don't drink any more. If you drink any more, you'll really get drunk. It's not good at all when you're drunk. I took the green tea and drank half the bottle. My body swayed slightly, but my mind slowly cleared. I looked up at him. Perhaps he saw the bloodshot eyes and red and swollen eyelids and was shocked. Shachuan, something's wrong with you today. I suddenly hugged him tightly. A crazy thought flashed through my mind. Because I had taken the initiative to hug him, Suchi's body stiffened. He stared at me blankly, probably unable to tell if this hug was due to the alcohol or if it was because he had lost control of his emotions. However, the next second I did something even crazier. I held his face in my hands and kissed his lips softly. Leaving his lips, I looked at him seriously. Seeing that he was still in shock, I smiled with tears in my eyes and asked calmly, "Su-Chi, don't you like me?" Su-Chi nodded. "I've liked you for so long. Do you still have doubts? Then let's go out, what do you think?" As soon as I finished speaking, Su-Chi was stunned for about 5 seconds before a surprised smile appeared on his face. "You finally agreed to go out with me?" He looked at me seriously. "Xiaochuan, are you joking? Or was it because he was drunk that he spoke nonsense? Will you regret it tomorrow?" "No, I promise to date you." Su-Chi smiled brightly and hugged me tightly. Then he whispered into my ear, "Little fool, do you like me too?" I said calmly, "No, I don't like you." Su-Chi was stunned when he heard this. He looked at me again with a puzzled expression on his handsome face. Chapter 31:29. I'm a slow person and it's hard for me to like someone. But since you've been chasing me for so long, I've decided to try dating you. Although I was smiling, I was begging in my heart. "Su-Chi, please let me fall in love with you. Let me fall in love with you without hesitation. Let me fall in love with you regardless of my own safety. Let me like you just like how I like Dongyu. I want to like you too." Su-Chi was silent for a few seconds. I wondered if he was starting to feel troubled, so I said, "Will it be too much? If it's too much, then forget it." With that, I turned around to leave. Su-Chi hugged me nervously from behind and quickly said, "No." "What?" He turned me around and caressed my face, smiling brightly. "Even if there's only a little hope, I won't give up. Xiaochuan, be my girlfriend." Crying and laughing, I promised him. I was also serious, really serious about cooperating with him. He couldn't sense my other emotions. He seemed inexplicably excited and immersed in joy. He held my face and asked with a smile, "Then can I kiss my girlfriend now?" Unlike his domineering attitude when we first met, he was actually asking for my opinion. I looked into his eyes and felt that they were exceptionally beautiful, like black jade agate. At this moment, they were so affectionate that it felt like they were sucking my soul away. I didn't dare to look him in the eye. Blushing, I lowered my head and pursed my lips. I nodded gently and smiled faintly. In the next second, he moved closer to me and kissed me on the lips. He was very careful, as if he was treating a precious treasure. He lifted my chin, leaned down, and kissed me. I responded obediently like a pious student, kissing him the way he kissed me. But the deeper he kissed me, the more my heart beat like a stagnant pool. There were no ripples, no splashes. It was as if my heart was so quiet that there was no echo. His lips were soft and warm, different from Dongyu's. Dongyu's lips were thin and slightly cold. One was passionate like fire. The other was as indifferent as ice. But the feeling it gave off was different after all. Su-Chi kissed me, but I didn't feel anything special. My heart didn't seem to be beating too fast either. I couldn't help but recall the scene of me and Dongyu kissing. In the music classroom, in the small forest at the bonfire party, we tasted each other's lips. At that time, our heartbeat felt like it was about to burst my eardrums. At that time, my heart was beating as fast as thunder. It was different. I almost couldn't tell which kiss was what a relationship should be like, and which heartbeat was the rhythm of a relationship. I only knew that I was responding to him seriously, but my heart was so desperate that it was about to collapse. What kind of feeling was a kiss supposed to feel? After becoming Su-Chi's girlfriend, her life turned upside down. Overnight, everyone in the school seemed to know about our relationship. Su-Chi couldn't wait to tell the world about it. The next day, the news spread throughout the school. Everyone knew that I had become Su-Chi's girlfriend. Sitting in the classroom and walking on the field, I could feel the probing, envy, jealousy, and scrutiny in their eyes when they landed on me. The name Su-Chi could be said to be an influential figure. Chapter 31:30. As a result, my popularity in class was already very poor. As a result, no one dared to approach me. The boys didn't dare to approach me to avoid arousing suspicion. Some of the girls distanced themselves from me. Some probably felt that it was ridiculous and unorthodox to be in a relationship in junior high. Some felt that I had tarnished Su-Chi's name and wasn't worthy of being friends with them. But I didn't care. At that time, I hoped that Su-Chi would be my salvation. I hoped that he could lead me out of a vicious circle. I hoped that he could take me away from the world of despair that Dongyu had brought me. I wanted to love him so much. I wanted to fall uncontrollably in love with this sunny and handsome boy. Then with him I could confidently appear in front of Dongyu and say with a smile, "Brother, I'm in love." This was my boyfriend. Everyone in school knew that Su-Chi and I were in a relationship, and Dongyu was no exception. Hence, that night after school when I walked to the school gate, I didn't see Su Chi. Instead, I saw Dongyu with a livid expression. He was carrying his school bag and his clothes were disheveled. His originally docile black hair was rebelliously covering his eyes. There were obvious bruises on his face. They weren't obvious, but if you looked closely, you could tell that he had been in a fight. I was a little surprised and walked over. Just as I was about to ask him if he had been in a fight, he suddenly grabbed my wrist and questioned me, "Is it true that you're dating Su Chi?" "Yes," I replied, pretending to be relaxed. "So you found out. Did he force himself on you?" Dongyu looked very angry, which made me even more flustered. I didn't know why he was so angry. Shouldn't he be happy? He had finally gotten rid of me and didn't have to be pestered by me anymore. Shouldn't he be happy? I smiled calmly and said, "I confessed to him last night. Coincidentally, he's liked me for a long time. It was consensual. No one forced anyone." "Are you crazy?" Dongyu said angrily, "I thought you treated Su Chi as your brother. You're still in junior high. Do you know what kind of guy Su Chi is? You can be friends, but dating is another matter." "I know. He's tall, handsome, bright, and popular. Moreover, he's very loyal. Most importantly, he treats me very well. He'll definitely be a very good boyfriend." Dongyu was obviously infuriated by my long speech. He ruffled his hair anxiously and frowned. Suddenly he glared at me again. "Did you guys kiss?" I nodded. His gaze froze for a moment before he continued, Both of you have other intimate relations." Halfway through his question, he felt uneasy and didn't ask any further. I felt even more embarrassed. My face was hot because I knew what he wanted to ask. To put it bluntly, he wanted to ask if Dongyu and I had slept together. At that time, I didn't know what kind of purpose I had, but I asked numbly, "What if I said yes?" "No." Dongyu lost control of himself and asked coldly, "Is it to take revenge on me?" "Revenge? Why should I take revenge on you?" It took me a few seconds to react. "Oh," I said with a chuckle. "Do you think I'm mad at you for finding a girlfriend?" I smiled and said, "Don't let your imagination run wild." "No." With that, I turned my head and wanted to leave. I was afraid that if I faced him again, my eyes would sting. Chapter 31:31. He turned around, got his bicycle, and caught up with me. He grabbed the strap of my bag and said, "Get in." I said a little angrily, "I'll walk back by myself." "Xiaochuan, get in." Dongyu seemed very persistent. "Don't make me lose my temper." When I heard this, I felt even more upset. Lose his temper? What right did he have to be angry? Did I do something wrong? Why was he allowed to have a girlfriend, while I had to get his consent and approval to date other boys? Why? I felt indignant and kept my head turned away from him. He was about to say something again when I saw Su Chi approaching me on his bicycle. He also saw Dongyu. As if on purpose, he didn't stop until he was beside me. The wheels of the bicycle were pressed against Dongyu's bicycle. It was more like a confrontation. When Dongyu saw him, his expression turned even uglier. "Get lost." Su Chi ignored him and said to me, "Get in." Dongyu said angrily, "Su Chi, have you forgotten what I warned you?" Before he could finish, I put my bag in Su Chi's basket and got into the back seat. I hugged his waist, ignoring Dongyu's anger, and said to Su Chi, "I want a soda." "All right, I'll treat you." As Su Chi spoke, he waited for Dongyu. Under his cold gaze, Su Chi turned the bicycle around and drove me away. I didn't look back. Dongyu didn't chase after us either. He must be disappointed in me, I thought. That night, after coming out of the karaoke room, Su Chi sent me home. Before he left, he grabbed the back of my hand and pulled me to him. He couldn't seem to hide the smile on his face. "You're leaving just like that? Aren't you going to say anything?" I asked. "What do you mean?" Su Chi scratched the bridge of my nose. "Aren't you going to give me a kiss?" My face immediately burned. I turned around shyly, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone standing on my balcony. I couldn't help but look up and catch a glimpse of the figure leaning against the balcony, looking downstairs. The night was too dark, so I couldn't see him clearly, but I could guess his identity. I bit my lip and suddenly turned around to look at Su Chi. Su Chi's initially disappointed face was instantly revived when I turned around. I scolded, "Idiot." Then she approached him, stood on her tiptoes, put her arms around his shoulders and gave him a kiss. He's too tall. Compared to his height of 1.8 meters, I'm 1.6 meters. I do seem a little petite and dainty. After Su Chi left, I turned around, but he was no longer on the balcony. After returning home, I passed by Dongyu's room and stopped in my tracks. I suddenly came to my senses. My actions just now were terrible. I don't know what I'm trying to do, who I'm trying to provoke, and what's the point. I walked to the balcony again and stood where Dongyu was standing. From this angle I could see everything clearly. I just wanted to show that I could do without him. Ever since that incident, Dongyu and I have distanced ourselves from each other. I didn't know if he was deliberately distancing himself from me or if I was deliberately distancing myself from him. I laughed at myself more than once. The tacit understanding between brother and sister was vividly displayed at this moment. Chapter 31-32. I followed behind him slowly, trying my best to hide my tracks. It wasn't until they were far away from the school gate that the two of them got closer. Sometimes Linley would take his hand and smile brightly at him. Dongyu would look at her gently, just like how he used to stand beside me and gaze at me. Sometimes Dongyu would gently hug her shoulders. Occasionally the two of them would play around and do some intimate things. Like a masochist, I witnessed their intimate moments with my own eyes. I often thought that Dongyu must have hugged her often, held her hand, kissed her, and perhaps even slept with her in the future. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but wonder if they had slept together? Had they done such a thing? I felt that it was a little dirty to think about it like this. However, I couldn't help but think about it. It gave me a splitting headache and a heart-wrenching pain. When I was dating Suchi, I was really attentive and worked hard to cooperate. I walked with him through the streets that I had once walked with Dongyu. I went to the ice cream shop, the movie theater, and the library that I had only been to with Dongyu. I felt like I was copying the shadow of the person in my heart onto Suchi, but I also felt that it was unfair. But I really didn't know how else I could fall in love with this sunny and handsome boy other than this. But I didn't know how to cut off my feelings for Dongyu. I had asked Suchi about this before. I asked him, "Suchi, what if you like someone you shouldn't like?" He asked me in return, "What do you mean by someone you shouldn't like?" "It's someone you shouldn't like. It's impossible between you and her. We're destined to never be together." "How is that possible?" "I don't believe that. As long as I like someone, I'll go after them until I get them." "Then, what if there's really no way to be together?" "Impossible." I mustered up my courage and asked, "What if that person is your sister?" Suchi looked at me and was stunned for a long time. Then he suddenly sneered, "How is that possible? This is incestuous sex. I'm not a pervert." As soon as he said that, he was stunned for a long time. Then he looked at me with a meaningful gaze. Perhaps it was from that day onwards that he vaguely sensed the subtle relationship between me and Dongyu. Hence, he would try every means to test me from time to time. I think he must also be wondering if my feelings for Dongyu were what he thought they were. In front of me, he would often bring up the details of Dongyu and Linley's relationship. Until one time, when Suchi took me to a party with his friends, he accidentally mentioned to me at the KTV that he had seen Dongyu and Linley walking out of the hotel together. "Don't tell me they got a room?" His smile was a little frivolous. I was annoyed. "Don't spout nonsense if you don't see it with your own eyes. Shachuan, what should I say about you? What else could the two of them do in a hotel? Other than getting a room, I can't think of any other answer." At the mention of getting a room, I suddenly recalled Suchi's words. He said that unless it was my resources, he would not act intimately with me. I asked what was too intimate. Chapter 31-33. As he spoke, he put his arm around my shoulder and snorted. "My dear wife, why are you so young? You're making me a little afraid to lay my hands on you." "Who's your wife?" "Of course it's you." "I'm not your wife." "Yes. Yes you are. When you graduate from university, let's get married." "That's in the future. No one knows." Suchi suddenly gripped my shoulder sternly and pretended to be displeased. "How could I not know? I've decided on you. I don't care, you're my wife. No one can break us up. Otherwise I'll—" "What will you do?" Suchi suddenly smiled as innocently as a child. "What can I do? I can only pester you for the rest of my life." I snapped out of my thoughts and felt a little lost. "Suchi, don't talk nonsense." He finally couldn't take it anymore. Probably because my expression was too ugly, it confirmed his suspicions. He asked me half-jokingly, "Shachuan, don't tell me, you like Dongyu?" I didn't speak. He suddenly took a big gulp of beer and asked, "Did you agree to date me because you wanted to use me and make me Dongyu's replacement?" Halfway through his sentence, his expression turned ugly, but he couldn't continue. I still didn't speak. I just stared at the table and didn't make a sound. He suddenly said seriously, "Shachuan, let's have a good talk." I felt that his serious expression was a little unfamiliar. I smiled and tugged at his arm. "Suchi, I'm tired. My head feels heavy, don't be like this." He pushed me away, looking distant and unfamiliar. I looked at him helplessly because he would never treat me like this. What's wrong with you? Suchi suddenly asked. Because I like you, you feel fearless, right? No matter how overboard you are, you're sure that I won't be angry, sad, or disappointed, right? Suchi, in Shachuan. Suchi finally lost control. He probably realized that I had an ulterior motive in dating him. He yelled at me as if hurt. What do you take me for? A replacement? You already have someone you like, don't you? That person is your brother, right? Suchi said through gritted teeth. Are you crazy? You can't like him. You can't love him. You're siblings. This is incestuous. You can't be together. I know. I understand. I don't think you understand anything at all. I told you I got it. I roared at him with all my might. Suchi was stunned. I sneered with tears in my eyes. Even you have to remind me of this? I know I can't love him, so I let you love me. Suchi, didn't you say that you would definitely make me fall in love with you? You're a man of your words. As if waking up from a dream, Suchi's thin lips trembled slightly. So you're really using me? He suddenly stood up and kicked over a few bottles of beer beside his feet. His face was livid. Inshatran, what right do you have to toy with me like this? Just because I like you, hopelessly in love with you, so you don't have to worry about my feelings? Chapter 31-34. I was a little afraid of how out of control he was. I stood up and tried to grab his hand. Suchi, work a little harder. I'm going to fall in love with you soon. Work a little harder. Enough. He stared at me coldly and questioned me with red eyes. How much longer are you going to play with me? I'm not playing with you. No. I'm serious. He suddenly looked at me deeply, his eyes unreadable. It was probably because my attitude wasn't sincere enough. Suchi bit his lip and laughed in anger. He curled his lips coldly and pretended to be calm. Let's get it over with, okay? I didn't understand Suchi's anger, just as he couldn't empathize with my despair. I kept asking him to stay or begged him to take me away. I wanted him to know the torment and struggle in my heart. But his heart seemed to have turned cold. In the end, he ruthlessly withdrew his hand and left without looking back. I was left sitting alone in the private room. Before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face. I must be a terrible girl, I thought. Suchi, who liked me so much and was so infatuated with me, had decided to give up on me. I'd been abandoned just like that. Why did Suchi leave? Another boy in the private room walked over. He glanced in the direction of the door, then looked down at me and sat down beside me. Your name is In Shachuan, right? The boy casually crushed his cigarette in the ashtray and took a can of beer and placed it in front of me. Ignore him. Drink. I raised my head and glanced at him. He was stunned. Why are you crying? The boy smiled. Did that Suchi make you angry? Perhaps it was because I felt abandoned that I had a desire to be valued by the world. So much so that when I saw the beer in his hand, I felt as if I could gain everyone's respect by drinking this. I didn't know how to drink. Dongyu had repeatedly warned me not to drink anything handed to me by others outside. But at that time it was fine if I didn't think of him. When I thought of him, all my nerves screamed and rebelled. This name was a rebellion that seemed to come from my bones. I snatched the beer away, opened the tab, and drank half of it in one go. So straightforward. The boy looked at me with satisfaction. After I finished one, he handed me another. I barely glanced at him as I took the beer from him and poured it down my throat. Back then, learning how to drink was just a momentary thought. He thought about those television dramas. Whenever he encountered something sad, he would drink until he was drunk. How delightful. Could drinking really make one forget everything for a short while? I don't know about the others. I only knew that the side effect of alcohol was that it made memories that weren't very deep in the first place become very deep. Whether it was happiness or pain, they were all torn into pieces. The beautiful memories of the past were especially vivid, so the pain was even more unforgettable. Because of the alcohol, the pain that wasn't very painful became even more painful in an instant. The struggle that was not very torturous became even more torturous. Halfway through the drink, I was drunk and muddle-headed. The painful, entangling, and heart-wrenching things all rushed into my head, tearing, pulling, and roaring. Chapter 31-35. I didn't know that alcohol could force a person into such a state. But I also understood why so many people were obsessed with it. It was because the pain that was usually buried in the bottom of their hearts would only break out when they were on the brink of drunkenness and break free from all restraints. At that moment, when all the pain was released, I felt great. I vaguely remembered grabbing someone's collar and asking, "Tell me, why can't I like Yin Dongyu? Why? Why can't I kiss him? Why can't I marry him? Why? Does he reject me when he clearly likes me? Yes. Indong you liked me. He thought that I would never grow up and would always be that ignorant girl. But couldn't I tell? When we kissed for the first time, I could see the intoxication and struggle in his eyes, the reluctance and conflict. He cruelly pushed me away, but the emotions in his eyes made me realize that he wanted to hug me even more. I hated that I had the same blood as him flowing in my body. If I could, give me a knife and I would be willing to bleed clean. That night, I was surrounded by the strong smell of alcohol and deafening music. Some people say that a girl's first time is like a sacred ceremony. I don't know how to describe my first night. If I had to use words to describe it, it would be like a cruel torture or a sacrifice. I used all my happiness and beauty to pay tribute to my pitiful and humble persistence. This might be the price of growth and sobriety, but the price was too deep. There were many cases of girls going astray during puberty on television. Whether it was the news or television series, it didn't seem to give me much of a warning. The next morning when I woke up, I opened my eyes and saw an empty ceiling. I stared blankly. What pulled me back to reality was the strangeness of my body. I had read many novels, but there was no description of the first time, such as being run over by a truck or the heart-wrenching pain. However, the burning sensation in a certain part of my body reminded me that my body had quietly changed without my knowledge. I saw the blanket covering me and sat up, only to realize that there was someone lying beside me. When I turned to look, I saw it more clearly. It was an unfamiliar teenager. Who did he say? Why was he lying here too? More importantly, why was he as naked as me? I clenched the blanket tightly and mustered up my courage to look at my body under the blanket. His hand was still wrapped around my waist. I couldn't have been more sober. It was like a blow to the head, and the nerves all over his body were tense to the point of pain. There was a tearing pain at the base of his thigh. What was even more heart-wrenching than this pain was the blankness and numbness in my heart, as well as the little bit of shame I had left. However, I didn't scream. Or perhaps the scream was stuck in my throat because of the humiliation. I couldn't scream or swallow it. I just sat there blankly. It was as if my brain had been emptied by an invisible hand. I didn't shout or cry. I thought it was a dream and I expected it to be a dream. Chapter 31-36. The boy seemed to have been startled by my continuous trembling. He opened his eyes and sat up. He first rubbed his hair, then turned around and noticed me immediately. You're awake? When did you wake up? I didn't dare to speak or look at him. I held on to my weak but foolish hope. He suddenly extended his hand and touched my face. His fingertips brushed against my cheeks and he smiled. Why are you crying? He rubbed his wet fingertips on the blanket and got off the bed. He picked up the clothes on the floor and muttered, "It was so rough last night." His sloppy tone was like that of a winner, incomparably proud. Just a few hours ago he had conquered a city. How could he not be proud? Put on your clothes since you're awake. He threw my clothes at me. Seeing that I still didn't move, he smiled. How long do you want to sit here like a fool? Between the lines, there was a kind of indifference that I abhorred. It was as if what I thought was earth-shattering was nothing in his eyes. I smiled at him foolishly and then asked, "Is it dawn yet?" He was confused at first. Then he walked to the window and lifted the curtains. It's dawn." In the next second he pulled the curtains wide open. I desperately wanted the sunlight to drive away the guilt in my heart, but I found that in the warm sunlight, my heart was as cold as ice, without any warmth. I got off the bed and picked up the clothes on the bed. Holding them in my arms, I walked to the bathroom. But as soon as I took a step, a certain part of my body was torn. There was an indescribable pain. There seemed to be something warm sliding down from the bottom of my thigh. He pulled me back and finally looked nervous. "You're not stupid, are you?" I looked at him and shook my head. He glanced at my face and followed my line of sight to look at my body. His gaze immediately fell on my lower body. My shame finally came back and I covered my thigh. But he reached out and touched it. "Why are you still bleeding?" He suddenly laughed. "Why are you bleeding so much? Don't tell me you injured that place. I couldn't get in last night and you were moving around, so I used a little more force. Did it tear? Do you want me to send you to the hospital to stop the bleeding? It's not that I haven't slept with a virgin before, but it's my first time seeing so much blood." My lips trembled violently and I clutched at my dress. "Why don't you take a shower first? Clean yourself up before you put on your clothes." I followed his orders like it was an imperial edict. I walked to the bathroom and stood under the shower head. As I stood there, something sticky seemed to flow out of my body and slid down. Under the cover of the water, I finally couldn't control my tears and they overflowed. When they left the hotel, it was already noon. Before he left, he told me his name. Feng Liang. I took the taxi fare he gave me and took a taxi to Han Zhao's house. I didn't have the courage to go back to school for class. I didn't go to class all morning. In my state, when I arrived at the classroom, it would be earth-shattering. I didn't dare to go home and stayed out all night. Whether it was my father, my mother, or Dongyu, once I got home I would face a trial. Chapter 31-37. Han Zhao's house was in a high-end neighborhood. I didn't know how long I'd been waiting on the steps. I saw a 5-year-old girl practicing riding a bicycle under her father's tutelage on the winding path. I recalled that when I was learning to ride a bicycle as a child, Dongyu would look at me nervously as he carefully controlled the center of gravity of the bicycle behind me. At the time I was only 6 years old. I stepped on the pedals and gripped the handlebars nervously, looking like I was ready to die. Dongyu told me not to be nervous and to relax as he pushed the bicycle forward. When I first started, I wasn't very proficient and often fell. But every time I was about to fall, Dongyu would rush up. His thin body would always be able to steadily support my center of gravity. Once, when I fell, he cushioned me with his body and I fell into his arms. When I got up, I laughed heartily. When I returned home at night, I found a few abrasions on his back. However, I wasn't ashamed at all. Instead, I laughed at his tender skin. For some reason, I started to miss the innocence and boredom of my childhood. I kept feeling that after I grew up, everything had changed. The burden on my shoulders had become heavier and heavier. In the evening, Han Xiao returned home from school. She walked to the door with her school bag on her back. When she saw me, her expression changed. Xiaochuan. I looked up and stood up awkwardly when I saw her. Why are you here? She was a little surprised. You didn't go to school today. Your parents came to look for the form teacher, looking anxious. When I passed by the form teacher's office, I heard your mother say that you didn't come home last night either. They've already gone to the police station to call the police. Han Xiao, I want to stay at your house tonight. Is that okay? I asked carefully. Han Xiao was even more surprised. Are you crazy? Why didn't you come home? I bit my lip. When I thought of what it would be like to go back, I couldn't help but cry. Han Xiao, other than here, I have nowhere else to go. Han Xiao squatted in front of me and cupped my face. Finally, she noticed something strange. Xiaochuan, where did you go last night? Tell me. Han Xiao gripped my shoulder tightly and asked anxiously, weren't you with Su Qi last night? You didn't go home. Where did you go? Don't ask any more, okay? I said in despair, don't ask any more. I beg you. Han Xiao hid me in her room. Because I was worried that her parents would find out, I even spoke cautiously. After dinner, Han Xiao returned to her room and brought me a carton of milk. Only this. I'm sorry, Xiaochuan. She put the milk aside, but I had no appetite at all. I guessed that my expression must have looked terrible, so Han Xiao was probably scared out of her wits. She sat beside me, put her arms around my shoulders and cried, Xiaochuan, don't scare me, okay? It was good to talk. Seeing you like this makes me sad as well. But how could she understand my sadness? In just one night, my whole world was shattered. At night, I lay in bed, not daring to close my eyes because when the world turned dark, the scenes from last night would appear in front of my eyes. I felt so dirty, but when I was bathing, I had already tried my best to scrub my body. I wanted to wash away these sins, wash away the man's scent and the traces he had left behind. Chapter 31-38. However, the truth was that the so-called turning into ashes was just an illusion. I wouldn't be reduced to ashes. In a sense, this could be considered a terrifying form of capital punishment. It was also like a cruel death by 1,000 cuts. Fate would not kill me, but it would torture me until the next layer of flesh was removed. I felt like I had probably received my retribution. Xiaochuan, what's wrong? Probably startled by my shaking shoulders, Han Xiao turned on the lights and saw me biting the blanket, gritting my teeth trying to hold it in. But my tears, one by one, covered the entire pillow. She hugged me, probably trying to give me as much warmth as possible. I greedily wanted to absorb her warmth. I hugged her and said softly, Han Xiao, I'm afraid. I was afraid. I was afraid that sooner or later, this matter would be exposed to the light of day. I was afraid. I was afraid of how Dongyu would look at me with disgust when he found out. I was afraid. What I was most afraid of was being abandoned by the world. The night passed in a daze. The next day when Han Xiao woke up, I also woke up in a daze. When she saw that I was awake, she asked me to go to school with her. I didn't dare to step through the school gate. I said, I'm not going. You go ahead. She asked me why I wasn't going to school. I didn't say anything else. She tried to persuade me, but I still refused to go. I wrapped myself in the blanket and curled up in the corner, hugging myself. She couldn't do anything to me, so she had to leave. After she left, I locked the door and locked myself in the room. Then I lay on the bed and looked up at the ceiling. My tears fell uncontrollably. At that time, I was so desperate that it felt like the sky was about to fall. But I didn't know who would hold on for me if the sky really did fall. I knew that if I only knew how to cry, I would be too weak. But in that case, other than crying, I didn't know how else to face myself. I had suffered so much for nothing. I didn't feel hungry after not eating for a day. I didn't feel thirsty after not drinking water for a day. In the afternoon, I heard footsteps outside the door. It seemed like someone had returned. They hugged their shoulders timidly and shivered. Then someone knocked on the door. I didn't dare to speak or make any noise. I was afraid that it was Han Zhao's parents, but I heard Han Zhao's voice. "Xiaochun, it's me, Han Zhao." Only then did I get out of bed. I walked to the door and unlocked it. Just as I opened the door, I saw Dongyu standing upright at the door. Seeing the door open, he barged in without waiting for me to react. The door was instantly flung open. I retreated in fear, glaring at him with a pale face. His face was filled with anxiety, anger, worry, and worry. "Why didn't you go home?" Dongyu approached me and questioned me angrily. "Where did you go the night before? Do you know that Dad and Mom have been looking for you like crazy? They've already called the police. They thought that you were missing and that something had happened to you." I stared at him dumbfounded. Then the anger of betrayal surged from my heart. I looked at Han Xiao. Her thin body shrank to the side as if she was afraid that I would vent my anger on her. She didn't dare to look up at my eyes. "Don't look at him. This matter has nothing to do with her." As Dongyu spoke, he reached out to grab my arm. Chapter 31-39. I saw his face stiffen. His eyes froze. "Why?" "Dirty." "Dirty?" I hugged my arms, not wanting him to touch me. I just didn't want to dirty his hands. I felt dirty. There were stains all over my body that couldn't be washed clean. In my heart, Dongyu was so inviolable that I didn't want to dirty his hands. But he seemed to have misunderstood me. When he heard the word coming out of my mouth, he slowly retracted his hand in midair. I saw his eyes darken. There was no longer any light in them. There was even an indescribable sense of loss. It was as if he was asking, "How did you become like this?" I couldn't stand the look in his eyes. I lowered my head and squatted down helplessly. I didn't know how long he stood there, nor did I know how long he had been scrutinizing me. I only saw him suddenly turn around and leave. Despite Han Zhao's repeated attempts to persuade him to stay, he left without looking back. Han Xiao chased after him out the door. After some time, she returned resentfully. She looked at me helplessly. "Xiaochun, what's wrong with you? You didn't say a word. You didn't even mention a word. What exactly happened that night?" I didn't say anything. I only knew that Dongyu had left. But I thought to myself, go as far as you can. Don't look back again. I didn't need him to care about me anymore. That night I still didn't eat. Han Xiao couldn't persuade me otherwise. My indifference almost made her break down. Just as she was at a loss, her mother shouted outside the door, "Xiao Xiao, someone's looking for you." Han Xiao went out. A few minutes later, the door was pushed open again. However, I sensed that the footsteps coming in were different. I finally looked up and saw Su Qi walk into the room with a pale face. When he saw me, he stood there in a daze for a long time before he walked up to me and squatted down. He reached out and wanted to hug me. Surprisingly, I didn't push him away like I had pushed Dongyu away. I only remember that when he was about to hug me, my mind was blank. I couldn't think of anything and didn't dare to think of anything. But later, I realized that perhaps at that time, I needed a warm embrace too much. The warmth I wanted, Su Qi couldn't give me. However, I didn't dare to hope for the warmth that Dongyu could give me. Other than Su Qi, I didn't know anyone else who could give me such warmth. When he hugged me, my tears flowed out of my eyes like a broken dam. I couldn't hold them back any longer. Perhaps it was my tears or my suppressed sobs that made him feel as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. He hugged me tightly and sobbed, "It's my fault. Don't cry." The more I heard this, the more I cried. I asked him, "Why did you leave me behind yesterday?" He asked almost impulsively. His entire body froze as if all the blood in his body had frozen. To him, these words were undoubtedly a knife that pierced his heart. He rubbed my shoulder guiltily, his voice trembling badly. "It's my fault. I shouldn't have left you behind yesterday." I asked him repeatedly in despair, "Why did you abandon me? Why? Why did you leave me behind?" "Su Qi, I didn't toy with you. I really didn't." Chapter 31-40. Chi hugged me and apologized profusely at a loss. "I'll never leave you behind again." I cried even harder, thinking how great would it be if I could turn back time. But there was no medicine for regret in this world, much less a time machine. I couldn't travel back in time, much less start over. But I didn't blame him, because I was the one who brought it upon myself. Perhaps it was because I was an extreme person in my bones. Even though I knew that I liked someone who was impossible, I was still eager to try. I repeatedly questioned this proposition, and in the end I got myself bruised all over. Chi was also a victim. What right did I have to blame him? That night he accompanied me home. In the past he had only sent me downstairs. But this time I paced back and forth downstairs, worried that I would be greeted by a storm when I entered the house. Chi saw that I was hesitating and didn't dare to go upstairs. He suddenly took my hand and said, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." I was even more stunned when I heard this. Dongyu had said this to me countless times. But in many moments of despair he wasn't by my side. I didn't know how trustworthy Chi's words were. It was because he was too young that he made some heavy promises casually. The promise he made back then was a sincere one. But he didn't fulfill it, and he really couldn't fulfill it. I had also changed from being firm in the beginning to being cautious. Chi held my hand as the two of them walked up the stairs and knocked on the door. It was my mother who opened the door. When she saw me, she reached out and grabbed my collar, pulling me home. When Chi saw this, he rushed over in fright and shielded me from her. He said, "Auntie, calm down." "Who are you?" My mother got even angrier when she saw him. My father walked out of the study. When he saw me, there was something wrong with his expression. He was worried, distressed, angry, and had mixed feelings. Dongyu was in the living room. When he saw me, he suddenly stood up and entered the study. My heart sank. Chi turned to look at me, then at my mother. He said softly, "My name is Chi. I'm Xiaochuan's boyfriend." "What? Boyfriend?" My mother couldn't accept it and rebuked him. "Are you kidding me? Our Xiaochuan is still in junior high school. Boyfriend? When did this happen?" "We've been dating for a year." Chi took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry, but I really like Xiaochuan. If it's possible, I'll consider marrying Xiaochuan after she's successfully admitted to university." "Get married? What a joke." I suddenly felt that his hand was very hot. I retracted my hand and said angrily, "Chi, don't talk nonsense. We've already broken up." I thought about what had happened that night and felt even more embarrassed. After that incident, my entire life seemed to have been turned upside down. Even my relationship with Chi had changed subtly. I didn't dare to have any extravagant hopes. Marriage between him and me in the future was even more ridiculous. Perhaps it was the word "break up" that made her mother feel even more unreasonable. She flew into a rage. "Xiaochuan, how old do you think you are? Dating and breaking up? Do you still want to study? Do you still want to enter high school?" I was silent. Chapter 31:41. What do you have to promise me? What do you have to swear to me? Do you know how terrible her monthly test results were this time? My mother suddenly waved her hand. "Let's not talk about this. Xiaochuan, let me ask you, where have you been for the past 2 days? Do you know that your father and I were worried that something had happened to you? We called the police. Your father and I haven't been at work for the past 2 days, and Dongyu hasn't been in class either. We've been looking for you everywhere. Are you playing with us?" I didn't dare to make a sound. I didn't know how to explain. Chi suddenly said, She was at my house yesterday." I was stunned. I glared at him and said angrily, "Chi, don't talk nonsense." My mother was even more surprised. Her eyes were full of emotions. "What did you say?" "Auntie, Xiaochuan has been with me for the past 2 days, but don't worry." Before Chi could finish, my mother couldn't control herself and slapped me in the face. "You immoral thing." She seemed to feel embarrassed and even angrier. She grabbed my collar and slapped me twice. She questioned angrily, "I've always told you that girls should have self-respect and self-respect. Have you turned a deaf ear to my words? I'll teach you a lesson today." As she spoke, she pointed at Chi and said, "And you? I'll talk to your parents about this tomorrow." I covered my face and knelt on the ground, crying bitterly. "Mom, hit me, I know I was wrong. But let Chi off. This has nothing to do with him. I wasn't with him." For an entire week, I was locked up at home to reflect on my mistakes. After that, my mother took me to the school to find the form teacher and gave me a harsh scolding. I didn't return home at night and skipped class. The form teacher originally wanted to keep me in school for probation, but after my mother's repeated pleas, I was given a demerit. At that time, the school's punishments were divided according to the circumstances. They were a warning, a serious warning, a demerit, a major demerit, probation, and expulsion. My case wasn't particularly serious. After the form teacher calmed down, it was just a demerit that would take a year to get rid of. At that time, a demerit was already a major punishment. If it couldn't be removed, it would affect my entrance exams. After the demerit, every time school ended, Mom would ask Dongyu to come home with me. Obviously, she wanted to separate me from Suchi. One day during class, I climbed over the school wall and asked to meet Suchi. Before he could speak, I said, "Suchi, let's break up." Suchi was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He immediately grabbed my shoulder and said in a trembling voice, "I don't want to. That night, I wanted to break up because I was angry. It couldn't be counted at all. I regret it. I don't want to break up with you. Let's get back together and start anew, okay?" I burst into tears. Holding back my tears, I pried his hand off one finger at a time as I choked. "It's too late. It's too late. What's too late?" He panicked. "I don't understand what you're saying. We can't go back anymore." I said, "Suchi, let me go. Let's break up." "No." Chapter 31:42. As I cried, I said, "I regret it. I don't want to be with you anymore. I hate you. I'm tired of you. Is that enough? Suchi, will you let me go? I don't like you, so don't force me, okay?" I yelled at him hysterically. In despair, my body slid weakly along the wall. I thought to myself, let me fend for myself. No one should care about me. Besides, I really didn't know how to face Suchi or Dongyu. My world was completely out of touch with theirs. I hugged my knees and cried silently, gritting my teeth. Suchi, on the other hand, stood in front of me at a loss. He wanted to touch me, but when he reached out, he saw my shoulders curling up. His hand eventually froze in midair and slowly retracted. After that day, Suchi and I didn't see each other again. He didn't look for me again, and I didn't look for him again. Every day, I went to school alone and finished school alone. When I got home, I did my homework in silence. I felt as obedient as a walking corpse. Until one day. That morning, I flipped open my calendar. It was May 10th, a special day. Ever since the second half of the first semester of the first year of junior high school, my period had come on the 9th of every month as scheduled. However, it was unexpectedly absent that month. I waited for it for a long time. Even after a long week, it still didn't appear. I panicked. In junior high school, although we were ignorant about the matters between men and women, we already had a vague idea. I already knew that what was supposed to come would come. If it didn't, something must have happened. During computer science class, I secretly went online to check for information. The reasons why my period didn't come were more or less the same. However, the biggest suspect was that I might have been pregnant. After computer science class, I didn't know how I felt when I walked the short few hundred meters between the computer classroom and my classroom. Pregnant. This word was too heavy for me to bear. I didn't dare to go to the hospital for a checkup. After 3 days of internal struggle, I finally mustered up the courage and walked into the pharmacy after school. Under the guidance of my teacher, I bought a few pregnancy tests. God knows how I walked in and how I left. From the beginning to the end, I kept my head down, not daring to meet the strange gazes of those people. However, I could still hear many people whispering behind my back. They were all talking about how children nowadays were. She was so young, but she got pregnant. She had no self-respect at all. Kids these days are really amazing. When I was her age, I didn't even dare to hold a boy's hand. Like an army deserter, I ran out of the pharmacy. I don't know. I didn't know that such a thing would happen, and I didn't know that there would be such a thing as an accidental pregnancy. I don't understand. After that incident, I should have taken the morning after pill in time. At that time, parents were very vague about the relationship between men and women. The early sex education classes only described the differences between men and women, but they didn't tell us how to deal with the aftermath of an accident. My mother only told me not to fall in love at an early age, but she didn't say that I would get pregnant after sleeping with a boy. The pharmacy staff said that it was best to do a pregnancy test in the morning. The first morning urine test was the most accurate. Chapter 31:43. I took the test twice in total. On the first night, I didn't sleep well because I was too nervous. The test results didn't seem to be accurate. There was only one bar indicating that I wasn't pregnant. However, this result wasn't accurate, so I didn't relax much. 2 days later, I took the test again. However, I saw that there were 2 bars on the test paper. One was a clear bar and the other was a very faint color. I didn't know what this meant, so I went to the pharmacy to ask again. The person at the counter said casually, That means you're pregnant. Go back and tell your parents about this. You probably went to the hospital to abort your pregnancy not long ago. How did I abort it? Just like that. She suddenly looked at me curiously, her eyes full of disdain. I say you're so young yet you got pregnant. But I don't think you have any shame at all. Didn't your family tell you that girls have to have self-respect and self-respect? If you had an abortion at such a young age, who would dare to marry you when you grow up? I didn't know how she could say such cruel words so casually. I didn't say anything and left with my head lowered. After leaving the pharmacy, I sat on the steps, hugged my knees and cried helplessly. Abortion. An abortion should cost a lot of money, right? But I couldn't afford that much money. This news was like a bolt from the blue. I felt like I was in hell, isolated and helpless. At that time, the only person I could think of was Han Xiao. When I returned home from school, I suddenly pulled her aside and stammered, hesitating to speak. She saw that I was talking about something else with a strange expression on my face. I couldn't string together a coherent sentence for a long time. She was a little anxious. Xiaochuan, what's wrong? What's the matter? Han Xiao, my voice trembled violently as soon as I spoke. Perhaps she had also noticed my strange expression, so she finally looked at me seriously. What's wrong? I think I'm pregnant. My voice was like a mosquito's. Every word was squeezed out from between my teeth. When Han Xiao heard this, her expression changed drastically. Her eyes widened in disbelief. What? I haven't had my period in a long time. I've taken 2 tests and I think I'm pregnant. What should I do? Do you know anything about this? How did she get pregnant? You and that man. She stopped abruptly. She was afraid that she would agitate me, so she asked, didn't you take any precautions? Even more embarrassed, I bit my lip and shook my head. Han Xiao was also at a loss. She said anxiously, I don't know much about this either. Why don't you take a leave and I'll accompany you to the hospital for a checkup? Then, if you're pregnant, do a painless abortion. Advertisements for painless abortions could be found all over the streets. I said helplessly, but I heard that abortion surgery costs a lot of money. I can't afford it. It's impossible for me to ask my mother for it. She won't give it to me. She asked for the reason. I can't say. She'll definitely break my leg. Han Xiao immediately calmed me down. Don't be nervous. I'll ask around for you. There should be other ways besides abortion. Don't worry. On the way home, we passed by the pharmacy. Han Xiao asked me to wait for her there while she ran into the pharmacy. 15 minutes later, she walked out with a red face and a box of well-packaged medicine in her hand. Chapter 31:44. Holding back her anger, she handed the medicine to me and said, the pharmacy staff said that if you're not pregnant for long, you can use medicine to induce an abortion. Xiaochuan, do you still remember the last time you had your period? I stuttered, last month. Han Xiao looked at the instructions on the medicine box and said, go home and try taking this medicine. However, I heard that if you undergo an abortion it will be very painful. The pharmacy staff said that after taking the medicine, a small blood clot will be expelled. That is the pregnancy sac. If that is expelled, it means that the abortion was successful. Holding the medicine, I asked nervously, how much is this medicine? I'll pay you back. No need, it's not expensive. She waved her hand and said, hurry up and take it. They said that the sooner the better, the less damage it will cause to your body. I nodded. When I got home and opened the door, Dongyu was not back yet. I clutched the medicine box tightly and entered the study. After closing the door, I carefully took out the medicine box and read the instructions carefully. It was difficult for me to read it. I didn't understand the instructions on it. Just as I was feeling confused, I heard the door open behind me. I was shocked and hurriedly stuffed the medicine box into the drawer to hide it. When I turned around, I saw that it was Dongyu. My expression became even more embarrassed. Brother? I called out to him softly, pretending that nothing had happened. Dongyu sized me up for a moment and suddenly questioned me, what were you holding in your hand just now? Medicine. I subconsciously let it slip. I immediately bit my lip and stopped talking. He raised his handsome eyebrows and became more and more puzzled. Medicine? Cold medicine. He immediately walked over nervously and reached out to touch my forehead. Have you caught a cold? I dodged like a snake and waved his hand away, resisting. Don't touch me. His expression froze and his gaze turned slightly cold. I immediately said, don't worry about me, okay? I can take care of myself. Dongyu looked at me quietly for a moment. Without saying anything, he turned around and left the study. Bang! The door was slammed shut with a deafening sound. I turned around mechanically and slowly opened the drawer. Looking at the medicine box lying quietly in the drawer, my heart was in a mess. Not long after, my parents came home from work. After finishing my homework and dinner, I hid in the bathroom. Just as I was about to take my medicine, I heard footsteps outside the door. My heart raced and I felt guilty. The next day, during the morning self-study session, Han Xiao handed him a note and asked, "Did you take your medicine yesterday? What do you think? Did everything go well?" I looked at the beautiful handwriting on the note and crumpled it into a ball with mixed feelings. After class, Han Xiao found me and asked me why I hadn't replied to her. I said, "My family was around last night, so it wasn't convenient." "Then what should we do? If I don't eat it early, will it have no effect?" Han Xiao was extremely worried. I leaned against the wall, head down, eyes empty. However, she suddenly said, "Why don't you come to my house tonight and tell your mom that you're coming to my house to do your homework? I'll cover for you while you take your medicine." I remained silent. Han Xiao was also silent for a moment. Suddenly she asked, "Don't tell me you can't bear to abort it? How could that be?" I looked up with reddened eyes and said, "I can't wait for this. I can't wait for it to not exist. Why would I be reluctant?" Chapter 31:45. It was said that only a man who had gone through 10 months of pregnancy, accompanied his wife during her pregnancy, prepared for labor and gave birth, and took good care of his wife and child while his wife was breastfeeding could officially become a qualified stay-at-home dad. Although a certain man was a veteran in business, he was still a newcomer in the world of stay-at-home dads. Now he was already a stay-at-home dad of 3 children. This was the first time in his life that he had experienced breastfeeding. Although he had done a lot of homework before, when it came to the real battle, Wuxia was still caught off guard. Wah 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 wah. In the middle of the night, in the crib, the little Yueyao struggled for a while before suddenly wailing. Unknowingly, the little Yueyao was already 5 months old. After moving back from the confinement center, Wuxia considered for a long time before finally placing the crib in the bedroom. The master bedroom was a very large suite with a living room, a study, and a private bathroom. It was designed in the same way as the suite in the presidential hotel. As for the location of the crib, firstly, he did not want little Yueyao to disturb the married life that he had been looking forward to for a long time. It had not been easy for him to survive 10 months of pregnancy, childbirth, and confinement. A certain man had long reached his limit. He was filled with ambition and was finally able to realize his married life. He sighed inwardly. However, if the crib was placed in another position, what if he couldn't hear the little Yueyao's cries in the middle of the night? Sometimes, when the little princess was hungry, he had to wake up in the middle of the night to feed her. Wuxia considered for a long time before finally deciding to temporarily place the crib in the bedroom. In the past few days, because of the wedding preparations, he had been racking his brains. During the day he was busy with the company's affairs. When he returned home at night, he had to personally participate in the wedding design. No matter how big or small, he had to personally look over everything. He had to repeatedly confirm and modify a plan several times before it was approved. At night, on time at 2 o'clock in the morning, the little Yueyao would definitely kick her little legs and ask for milk. It was as if the little one's arrival was to overdraft his excess energy. It was very rare for Yun Shirshir to get up to feed the babies. Her physique was not very good. If she got up in the middle of the night, she would not be able to fall asleep again. After the confinement period, she still had to pay more attention to recuperation. After all, childbirth was quite damaging to a woman's vitality. Therefore, every time before going to bed, Yun Shirshir would use a breast pump to store enough milk in a milk bottle and place it in the refrigerator to cool. When the little Yueyao wanted to drink it, Wuxia only needed to warm it up. As for her, all she had to do was to put on her earplugs and rest. At first, when Wuxia suggested that he would be the one feeding her at night, Yun Shirshir had some misgivings. After all, his work was not easy. He had to get up in the middle of the night to take care of Xiao Budian, which was too strenuous. However, Wuxia said that, not to mention that Yun Shirshir had just undergone surgery and still needed to recuperate, he enjoyed his passion for this job. However, a certain man had other plans in his heart. It was said that children at this age would start to recognize people. If he took care of her more when she slowly grew up, she would definitely be the closest to him. Therefore, with this selfish motive, a certain new stay-at-home dad started his real life of taking care of a baby. Chapter 31:46. Over time he had figured out the pattern of his little princess. Usually, around 2 in the morning this little princess would be hungry. Her biological clock was excessively accurate. She couldn't be a minute earlier or a minute later. Speaking of which, this little Yueyao was quite interesting. She was still a small ball of glutinous rice, but she already had the demeanor of a queen. Whenever she cried, if he didn't rush over immediately to coax her in his arms, her cries would become louder by a few decibels if he was a few minutes late. Muyaja woke up at once when he heard her cries. He immediately got up from the bed and, with his slightly messy black hair, shuffled over to the crib as if he were sleepwalking, as if he was familiar with the place. This route had already become a subtle influence on him. The moment he heard the cries, he instinctively felt his way over without turning on the lights. Little Yueyao's cries grew louder. Muyaja squinted his sleepy eyes and hugged the soft little fellow in his arms. He coaxed her gently, "Yes, yes. Your Majesty, this subject came too late to rescue you. This subject deserves 1,000 deaths. This subject knows his mistake. Your Majesty, please forgive this subject." When he opened his mouth, his voice was extremely hoarse. The sensor lights lit up. He looked down and saw that little Yueyao's little face was red from crying as if she had been greatly wronged. Muyaja carried her into the living room. There was a crib in the living room. He placed her in it first, then quickly took out a milk bottle from the refrigerator. He quickly heated it up and shook it. Then he walked over to the crib and carried Yueyao. She was still crying so hard that her little mouth was wide open. Muyaja took the opportunity to stuff the pacifier into her little mouth. Little Yueyao almost instinctively sucked on the pacifier. Her two tender little hands hugged the milk bottle just like that as she sucked on the milk. In the beginning, when they were changing the milk bottle, little Yueyao was a little unhappy. When it was stuffed into her mouth, she turned her head from time to time and rubbed against it, refusing to drink the milk obediently. Speaking of which, there was a slight difference between a milk bottle and a human's breasts. Hence, little Yueyao was very disdainful of the milk bottle. However, when it came to this, Yu was smart. He found a spare milk bottle and poured Coke into it. Then he stood by the crib and started to drink the Coke with relish in front of little Yueyao. Why else would there be a saying that out of someone else's pot was always the best? Little Yueyao was only a few months old, she already knew this. Hence, when she saw him hugging the milk bottle with relish, her originally tearful eyes. Her eyes widened in curiosity as she watched Yu sucking the cola from the milk bottle. Craving for it, she reached out her chubby little hands wanting to drink it. Yu deliberately refused to give it to her, so little Yueyao grabbed his hand and asked for it. Yu waved the milk bottle in his hand to show off. He had an arrogant look on his face and refused to let her drink. Little Yueyao became anxious and started to cry loudly. Seizing this opportunity, Yu swapped the milk bottle and stuffed it into her arms. Little Yueyao was satisfied. She hugged the milk bottle and stopped crying. She smiled with tears in her eyes. Muyaja quickly took the milk bottle and fed it to her. Chapter 3147. Thus, Yun Shirshir had no choice but to squeeze the milk into a milk bottle and store it in the freezer. This was a good thing. After all, when little Yueyao drank milk, it often hurt her. Using a breast pump to suck the milk out would make her feel better. Thus, as time passed, little Yueyao started to drink milk from a milk bottle in advance. Muyaja carried Yueyao to the sofa and lowered his head to watch her drink milk. Little Yueyao's eyes were red from crying earlier, as if they had been dyed with rouge. With tears in the corners of her eyes, she hugged the milk bottle as if she had walked in the desert for several days and nights and finally found a clear spring. She drank it in big gulps as if she was thirsty. What a greedy little kitten. Muyaja gently scratched the tip of her nose. His heart felt as if it had been filled to the brim. But as she drank, she looked at him with her eyes wide open. Seeing that he was gazing at her gently, little Yueyao actually smiled with tears in her eyes. With this smile, the entire world seemed to brighten up. Especially when there were tears in the corners of her eyes and her eyes were still red, when she smiled, it gave off the feeling of being enchanting. She was still a baby. How could she smile so beautifully? This pair of eyes gave her quite a lot of points. The black and white were distinct and they were round and big. Based on the contours of her eyes, one could imagine that this pair of eyes resembled her mother's. Her almond-shaped eyes were extremely alluring. Just holding this little girl like this, Muyaja felt a great sense of accomplishment. This sense of accomplishment was definitely not something that could be compared to signing a few billion-dollar contracts. When he hugged her, he felt as if he owned the whole world. This was probably how it felt to be a father for the first time. Muyaja had an impulse to bring all the best things in the world to her. In the past, he had been ruthless in his career purely because of his ambition and his struggle against fate. In such a frightening family, survival of the fittest was the law of the jungle. But now, his ruthlessness in his career had redefined himself and he had a firm goal. His ambition was to give his wife and daughter a better life. Now, he had a wife whom he loved deeply and 3 children whom he loved dearly. In order to give them the best life in the world, he naturally had to give it his all. Hence, Muyaja was even more motivated than before when it came to work. However, he didn't neglect his other 2 sons and his wife just because of little Yueyao's birth. He knew that the happy life and complete family he had today were all thanks to this woman. Therefore, he doted on her even more than before, just so that when their hair was white, he could hold her hand and ask her if she was happy with him in this life. Without hesitation she could say, yes. To him this was the true achievement of his life. This man was very clear about the position of everyone he cared about. Whether it was Yu, Xiao Yichen or even little Yueyao, they were all his loved ones. However, they were destined to be passers-by and travelers. When they grew up one day they would have their other halves sooner or later. Yu and Xiao Yichen would meet their destined love, and little Yueyao would have her life partner. Chapter 31:48. When it was time to feed, Yu got up and went to the bathroom. When he walked out of the room and passed by the living room, he saw Muyaja sitting on the sofa and feeding Yueyao. He immediately woke up and ran over to Muyaja's side. He snuggled up to Muyaja and looked at the little Yueyao who was happily munching on the milk bottle. Muyaja glanced at Yu and saw that he was drowsy. One of his eyes was open and the other was closed. His eyelids were swollen and hazy, and he couldn't even open his eyes. He couldn't help but say unhappily, "Go to sleep if you're tired." No. I want to watch over my little sister." Muyaja snorted coldly and shielded the little Yueyao. "It's not like you don't have the chance to see her. Take me for example. I can only hug her for a while at night." Yu looked at him. From his words he felt that his father was a little jealous. It was probably because he didn't want to let go of the little Yueyao and didn't let him hug her. Now that he had the rare opportunity to hug the little princess, his expression was guarded as if he was guarding against a thief. It was as if he would snatch the little Yueyao away the next second and run away. How childish. "Daddy, you're already so old. Why are you still acting like a little kid? You can hug her. No one will snatch her away from you." Muyaja was speechless. This guy. Ever since Yueyao was 5 months old, the ban on visitation was lifted. When Yun Shirshir returned home from the confinement center, many people called and said that they wanted to visit her. However, Muyaja said that the child was too young and it wasn't convenient for strangers to visit her. But in reality, he had his own selfish motives. His daughter had just been born and he hadn't seen enough of her yet. When he thought about how he had to take care of the guests coming and going, he would have less time to spend with the child. He couldn't be bothered to entertain the guests who came to visit, so he made it clear that he was in a state of declining visitors. When the little Yueyao was a little bigger, his excuse would no longer be valid. Hence, on the first day after the ban was lifted, Jianghu and Lu Jinyu took advantage of the company's lunch break and rushed over with their bags. Yun Shirshir hadn't even served them tea yet, but they couldn't wait to run to the crib and surround it to look at the little queen lying in the crib. Little Yueyao could already lift her legs. It was said that babies at this age had very soft bones, but she could already lift her little feet. She held the soles of her feet with both hands and rolled around, enjoying herself. Little Yueyao wasn't afraid of strangers when she saw him. She blinked her watery eyes as if she was examining him. When Jianghu saw the little princess, he exclaimed and covered his mouth. His heart was about to melt. So cute, so cute. Ah. Jianghu was a well-known lolicon. Lu Jinyu joked that if he gave birth to a daughter in the future, he would definitely be the world's top daughter slave. He loved beautiful little princesses the most. When he saw little Yueyao, it was as if he had lost his life. Little Yueyao had already grown up. Her fair and tender skin looked as if it could be broken by the slightest breeze. It was as fair and flawless as a freshly peeled shell. Other than her frighteningly thick eyelashes, she resembled Yun Shirshir more. Her nose was still indistinguishable, but just by looking at the sharp tip of her nose, she seemed to have inherited Muyaja's high nose bridge. It was very exquisite. Her little mouth was small and cherry pink. She looked like Yun Shirshir. Chapter 31:49. They had specially rushed over while Muyaja was in a meeting at the company. If Muyaja were around, he probably wouldn't bear to let them touch even a strand of her hair. Yun Shirshir saw Jiangxin's eager expression and then turned to look at Lu Jinyu, whose eyes were glistening at the side. How could she bear to reject them? But do you know how to carry a child? A 5-month-old child's bones are very soft. You have to be careful when carrying her. Yes. I've carried a child before. I know how to carry a child. After Jiangxin's older sister gave birth to her second child, he had carried a child. He had also asked his older sister for some tips on how to carry a child. Hence, he was rather confident in carrying a child. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen stared at them from the side. When Jiang Shen successfully carried little Yueyao into his arms, Yu Yu took a closer look at him. She was really relieved when she saw that Jiang Shen indeed knew how to carry a child. This small detail fell into Yun Shishir's eyes and she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Are these two guys going to follow in their father's footsteps and become cis-obsessed from now on? However, not long after Jiang Shen carried the little princess in his arms, he saw that little Yueyao had stopped moving and was staring at him eagerly. Suddenly, she turned her head and glanced at Yun Shishir, who was standing at the side and looking at her with a smile. Suddenly, the corners of her mouth wrinkled slightly. It was as if a storm was brewing under the calm surface. Jiang Shen saw her little face contorted. Before he could figure out what was going on, he saw little Yueyao clench her little pink fists and open her mouth to cry. Wah wah. Little Yueyao had never liked to cry. However, whenever a stranger carried her, she would be very shy. When there was no room for her to struggle, she knew how to express her dissatisfaction by crying. Otherwise, how could she be described as a noble little queen? Now she was very good at recognizing people. Apart from Mu Yaja, Gong Jie, and Yun Shishir, even Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen seemed to be condescending to be carried by these two little guys. It was fine if it was for a short period of time, but if it was for a longer period of time, she would get impatient and cry even harder. This little Yueyao wasn't someone who could be controlled by ordinary people. Even Yun Shishir was surprised. When he was young, Yu Yu's. Back then, no matter who carried him, he just didn't smile and would keep a straight face, but he didn't cry so easily either. However, this Yueyao was very arrogant. It was not a problem for Mu Yaja and Gong Jie to carry her. However, even when Hua Jin carried her, she was very repulsed. Yun Shishir said, Hua Jin, you didn't breastfeed her or change her diapers. Naturally, Yueyao doesn't like you. However, Hua Jin felt extremely aggrieved. He wanted to change her diapers, but there were always people lining up to do something like changing diapers. For example, Mu Yaja, Gong Jie, and Yun Shishir. How could he have a chance? He didn't have the experience of being a stay-at-home dad. Everyone thought that he was clumsy, but who hadn't gone through the process? Moreover, there was a period of time when Hua Jin went to film, saying that he wanted to earn money for little Yueyao's milk powder. However, Mu Yaja emphasized, I'll earn money for the milk powder. Then I'll earn money for Yueyao's toys, okay? Chapter 3150. However, Jiang Shen felt aggrieved. How long had he held her in his arms? It hadn't even been half a minute. Why was she crying so hard? She wasn't giving him any face at all. Seeing this, Yu finally felt satisfied. He was overjoyed. Ah, I knew it. How could little sister be so easily hugged? My little sister is very prideful. Not just anyone can hug her. She's very shy with strangers. If she doesn't like someone, she won't even let him hug her for a second. He emphasized the word, someone she doesn't like. Jiang Shen felt that he was being attacked for no reason. He protested innocently, I've only just met the little princess for the first time. If it weren't for boss, I would have won the little princess's heart long ago. You, what are you talking about? You're not loving at all. Why aren't you comforting Uncle Jiang? Instead, you're gloating at his misfortune. Because he can't hug little sister for long. If he hugs her for too long, she'll cry too. He doesn't give her any face at all. Xiao Yichen mercilessly exposed him. Yu Yu's smug face instantly darkened. His little face fell as he rebuked Xiao Yichen. Do I need you to expose me? You make it sound as if you can hug her for a long time. I deliberately timed it last time. Xiao Yichen said self-righteously. I hugged Yueyao for 3 minutes and 11 seconds before she cried. Yun Shishir found it interesting and asked, then how long did you persist in hugging little sister? 1 minute and 59 seconds. Xiao Yichen put his hands on his waist, feeling very proud of himself. Yu Yu's face darkened even more. He glared at Xiao Yichen angrily. Lu Jinyu found the two little fellows too adorable. He was convulsing with laughter at Xiao Yichen's serious tone. These two little fellows were too funny. Little Yueyao saw that they were chatting happily and seemed to have neglected him, so he cried even louder. Yun Shishir was about to say that she would take over when Lu Jinyu volunteered, let me try carrying him instead. Jiang Shen refused. Lu Jinyu said, you must think that you'll lose face if Yueyao laughs if I carry you. Are you scared? Who said I'm a coward? Jinyu, it's the same even if you carry him. This little guy is very good at recognizing people. If you don't believe me, you can try. Naturally, Lu Jinyu refused to admit defeat. He walked forward and carefully took the baby Yueyao from his hands. As soon as he took the baby, the Yueyao saw that it was someone else. However, when it opened its eyes and saw that it wasn't the person it wanted, it seemed to be angry and cried louder. It even raised its two stubby legs and kicked Lu Jinyu fiercely. How much strength could a 5-month-old baby have in his legs? Moreover, Lu Jinyu often worked out and had a lot of strength in his arms. Her kick didn't hurt or itch at all. He didn't feel anything at all. However, it was obvious that the little fellow was very repulsed by him. Jiang Shen was smug when he saw this. See? I told you this little Yueyao can recognize people. She'll cry even if you carry her. However, Lu Jinyu was indignant. You only know how to make sarcastic remarks. Yun Shishir couldn't stand it anymore. She saw that Yueyao was crying so hard that her voice was hoarse. Afraid that she would cry until she fainted, Yun Shishir immediately walked forward and said, "Let me carry her. Our savior is here, our savior is here." Lu Jinyu said, breaking out in cold sweat. Chapter 31:51. Seeing that I had lost control of my emotions, Han Xiao immediately hugged my shoulders gently. Everything will pass. Although I don't know what happened, Xiaochuan, I will be with you. Han Xiao, will you look down on me? I asked in a choked voice. I really don't know. I didn't want to. I feel like a failure, so dirty. The people at the pharmacy said that my life is over. It will become a stain that I can't erase. What should I do? Han Xiao's eyes reddened when she saw that I was crying. She said, Xiaochuan, don't let your imagination run wild. Don't worry, no matter what happens, I will believe you. Ectopic pregnancy was a terrifying nightmare for women. I didn't know what ectopic pregnancy meant when I was young, and I didn't know that ectopic pregnancy couldn't be aborted with medicine. It could be fatal. At that time, because of my shame, I didn't dare to step into a place like the hospital. In my heart, doctors were sacred. I couldn't imagine what kind of methods the doctor would use to examine my body when I stood in the consultation room, and then what kind of gaze he would use to look at me. So, with that kind of opportunity, I might be able to avoid even greater harm. However, at that time, I was lost and didn't have a pair of hands to guide me out of this foggy swamp. Han Xiao took me home, and Han Xiao's parents warmly entertained me for dinner. After dinner, Han Xiao encouraged them to go out for a walk. This way I would have a chance. She pushed me into the bathroom and urged, "Hurry up and take your medicine, before my parents come back." Will there be a lot of bleeding? I asked worriedly. There will be bleeding, but the person at the pharmacy said that if it's used properly, there won't be any danger. Han Xiao hesitated. Actually, it's best to go to the hospital and take it under the doctor's guidance. However, I don't think you'll want to go. I'm not going to the hospital. I trembled at the mention of the hospital. Han Xiao immediately comforted me. It's okay, Xiaochuan. Don't be so sensitive. You're not a criminal. Why would I force you to go to the hospital? I glanced at her gratefully. Thank you, Han Xiao. She nodded and closed the door considerately. I sat on the toilet and opened the box. Then, I quickly glanced at the instructions and swallowed the medicine with warm water. At first, there wasn't any reaction when I took the medicine. Just as I was worried that the medicine wouldn't work, about 10 minutes later, when I stood up and was about to leave, I felt a sharp pain in my stomach. What was different from the pain of menstruation was that this kind of pain was the pain of falling. It was as if something was fiercely sawing at something in my stomach, pulling it down by its roots. I slumped to the ground, holding my stomach as I knelt on the spot. I was in so much pain that I broke out in cold sweat. I put on a sanitary pad in advance, but the blood gushing out made me feel like my pants were about to be soaked. I was so embarrassed that I didn't know what to do. It was so painful that my brain felt numb. Chapter 31:52. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I apologized in a panic, but I couldn't tell who I was apologizing to. To the pitiful and innocent little life in my stomach? Or to the bathroom? I wiped the floor in pain, but just as I wiped the floor clean, it got dirty again. I took a tissue to wipe it again. The more I moved, the worse the pain in my stomach became. I grabbed my clothes tightly, not daring to take off my pants or face the strange situation of my body. I wanted to call Han Xiao, but I was afraid that she would see me in such a sorry state. At that time, the entire world would spin, and all the scenery would become blurry and unfamiliar. I struggled to get up from the ground, but the pain made me kneel on the ground. My body curled up like a shrimp, shivering. I suddenly felt cold. My whole body was cold. Outside the door, Han Xiao suddenly knocked. Xiaochuan, how are you? Are you done? My parents are coming back soon. I'm not done yet, I suddenly said with a sobbing tone. Han Xiao, I'm sorry. I think I dirtied the bathroom. I'll clean it. Clean it before opening the door. Han Xiao was stunned for a moment before she suddenly opened the door hurriedly. Did you bleed a lot? Xiaochuan. Open the door. Open the door first. But I didn't dare to open the door. I was afraid that if I opened the door and Han Xiao walked in, she would hate me too. After a while, Han Xiao stopped knocking on the door and left in a hurry. Then, I vaguely heard the footsteps of two people outside the door, one in front and one behind. Xiao Xiao, where's your classmate? In the bathroom. Oh. I thought that her parents must be back, but I couldn't open the door at all. I hadn't tidied up the bathroom yet. I stood up with the help of the wall, only to see a pool of blood on the ground while I was unconscious. My lips trembled as I tried to get a clean tissue, but the more I panicked, the more I made a mess. I forced myself to lean against the wall. My vision turned black and I lost consciousness for a moment. When I opened my eyes again, I heard Han Xiao knocking on the door in a panic. Xiaochuan. Xiaochuan. Open the door. Xiao Xiao, why was your classmate in there for so long? Is she not feeling well? Dad, Mom, go back to your room. I'll take good care of her. I lost consciousness again. When she woke up again, she heard the sound of someone knocking on the door. Outside the door, Su Qi's anxious voice could be heard. He's been inside for so long and hasn't responded. Something must have happened. Why did you take so long to call me? I don't know either. Out of the way. I'll break the door open. I said hoarsely, don't hit me. Just as I reached out my hand, the door was kicked open by Su Qi with a loud bang. He rushed into the bathroom and lowered his head to see me leaning against the wall. I looked delirious. In my blurry vision, I could see his panicked expression. Xiaochuan, what happened to you? When Han Xiao saw me in such a miserable state, she was also frightened. Her eyes immediately turned red. Hurry up and send me to the hospital. Send him to the hospital. What's going on? Su Qi questioned in a low voice. How did she end up like this? Su Qi, don't ask. Hurry up and send him to the hospital.